2. Two. Check. Hello. I'm not waiting. I'm not waiting for this. We got the rarely seen gold monster today. Gold monster. I think it is pineapple, yeah. Oh, that hits the spot. That hits the spot. I'm lacking clarity. I'm lacking mental clarity and energy right now, folks. I got little energy. I got low mental clarity. This is going to boost me right back up. You know, I'm just like looking at myself right now. I think the thing about this look that's bothering me is that like when my hair dries, it like you don't see enough of it back there. It looks like a bowl cut or something. You don't see all this. It gets all curly and it goes up. And then it looks like I have this really like bowl kind of situation. I think that's what the issue. I think this look would be a little bit... I think the hair's got to be longer, frankly, for this look to really work the way I want it to. I might have no choice but to continue growing it. I don't know. I don't know. Thank you, Jules. That's very kind of you. I might have to. I don't know. I'm really teetering back and forth right now between wanting to shut it down and get a trim, not even get it cut short, but just get like get a trim, or whether I want to just go all the way with this. Do I want to just go all the way with this look? I don't know. And go in the really like 70s territory? I'm at kind of a crossroads with my look right now. I think really the way it's going to work is if it goes even longer. My vote is to keep growing. My hair is down to my belly button. That is long. I don't think I'm going to grow it that long. That's maybe a little bit more than what I was thinking. I don't know. I'm not sure, though. I did shave today, though. I shaved like this part. Oh, excuse me. How's everyone doing? It's nice to see you. Gotta hold on to whatever hair you can at this age. Well, that's one thing. It's like, you know, I just turned 40. That is one thing I seem to not be in any danger of. I still got plenty of that to work with. My hair goes past my waist by a good 6 inches. That is long. That is very long. I don't think the most I've ever grown my hair was like down to here. I did have longer hair like in my 20s for a couple years. Maybe I could do that again. I know. I'm a lot larger. Let's just to say the least now than I was at that time. This is maybe 15 years ago. I don't know. I know it's hard for you to tell, and you all think that I'm in peak physical condition. I have put on a few pounds since that time, though. So I don't know if I could pull it off to the same extent. I didn't have the mustache then, though. That really adds something to it. I just ordered a sandwich. Usually try not to do the during the day delivery. Try to avoid it. I got a bunch of stuff to make for dinner, but I was looking around at something I could get going for lunch, and I didn't really have a lot of options. I felt like I need to go. I keep going grocery shopping, but only getting like, also because everything is more expensive now as well. But I spend like $70-$80 at the grocery store, and I get stuff for like a couple of days, a couple of meals, but I don't have like provisions. I can't go, oh, I'm going to make a sandwich and do that. It's like, I just, I'm getting stuff for specific dinners, and I'm making those, and they're great. But when it comes to like normal everyday stuff, I'm kind of running a little low here. Grow for winter. So a number of people are encouraging me to continue this journey. I don't know. Groceries are up at least 40% for me. I got to adjust what I'm buying. Yeah, it's really stupid.
You can count on me. You're going to have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Is that you, Diego? Diego, thank you for 33 months of Prime. And for all the support you've shown me in the channel. Thank you, Diego. Very close to the 36 months, Diego. I don't know if you're going to be the first to get there, but you're going to be one of the first. I think that's one cool thing about Season 4 coming up. Once Season 4 hits, we're going to see a bunch of new sub badges. I grew my hair out over COVID despite being real bald on the crown. Good time. Recommend doing it while you got it. You skullet. Nothing wrong with a skullet. Or is that even? I guess if it's just on the crown, then it's not quite a skullet. Season 4 is very exciting. Very, very exciting. Yeah, I did see the $100 worth of groceries post. Some odd choices in that, though. And the guy is talking about, like, nutrition. And he has a bunch of, like, pre-sliced fruit and, like, sugary cereal and stuff. It's like, yeah, that's always going to be more... Just get the fruit, and then you're going to... And cut it yourself. Also on the Marble Island, yeah. Not sure if it's the greatest gamer PC in the background. I didn't see that. Yeah, this is in like a $800,000 home probably. I do love to cut my own fruit. That's right. I do. That's absolutely correct. $100 of groceries. You got a bunch of pre-sliced fruit. $5 for this thing of watermelon. That looks like hummus being made in the occupied Palestinian territories too, so he's canceled for that as well. You got a bunch of corn and sugar cereal. Some strawberries, some blueberries, kind bars, peppers. I don't know. Feels like a how do you do fellow poors post. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's gotten unquestionably more expensive, definitely, which is tough. I feel like just juice. Like, I'm getting my kid this juice, and because he's so fucking particular about the kind of juice that he wants. And used to be able to get 3 things of it for $10, and now 1 thing of it is like 5. It's like over $5 for just like a thing of 12 juice boxes. Or 10 or 12. Buying the particular kid thing's way more expensive. Yeah, it's that's frustrating. And it's frustrating that we allow this system where these individuals, private enterprises own these stores and are just like, I just reject this idea of inflation as being this like scientific concept. Like, I know all the economics 101 people will go and sit there and tell you exactly, no, when you do this and you combine X and Y, it means inflation. At the base of this concept, though, there's human beings, individuals, that are saying, this is what the price of this product is now going to be. This is what the price of this product is now going to be. And I propose that they simply don't do that. That's my crazy idea. Or you get the government involved, the state that's supposed to be like, we pay taxes to and we vote for people to represent us. I would like the state to step in and be like, stop doing this. Make things less expensive. Why is that so hard? Why is that so hard for someone to just go to the people that own these fucking companies and these chains and these stores and say, like, stop doing this? You're saying that item costs this much? No, we're telling you that it actually costs this much. It actually costs less. I would simply enact price controls. It's really frustrating the way that, like, the market removes the human element of this, and we just, it's the market, and that's your excuse for everything. And this whole farcical idea, which has been debunked, I don't know how many times it needs to be debunked, that like people like Pierre Poilievre are promoting that inflationary spending is causing this. That's why. It's because we spend too much money allowing people to live lives of dignity. That's what's the problem. The more that we like support poor and working class people with social programs and social spending, the more the inflation happens. We just got to cut out the social spending and then no more inflation. And it's like, it's so fucking grotesque. It's just the market, and the market is the handful of companies that control all the other companies. We're talking about, what, 7 companies here? Maybe at one point that was like a diverse blend of different companies and different organizations. It's now just been all turned into this big, gigantic glob. Is 7 even being generous? It's like 3 companies basically that just own all the different products, and a handful of families that own the grocery chains. Just go in and say, no, stop inflating the prices. Stop inflating the prices. What's wrong with that? Why can't someone do that? Oh, hello, you're the grocery chain guy? Guess what? Stop inflating the prices. Or we will just go ahead and take your grocery chain and we'll decide how much things cost. How about that? Even if there was like a state-sponsored grocery chain, and you can have your fucking private grocery chains, but guess what? We're going to charge this much for things. And or the same thing with housing. We're going to charge, housing, like the average apartment is $2,500. Well, we're going to build a bunch of apartment buildings and rent them for $1,000. And force these private enterprises to adjust to this, the way that the market is bringing them. Now, why can't we do that? Even Nixon tried price controls. I mean, the thing is, Obama said, like, I'm like to the right of Nixon, and he was absolutely correct. Nixon was like a monstrous person, but was unquestionably to the left of like every single one of our modern like neoliberal leaders. Nixon was basically like the last New Deal president that America had. Look, once BlackRock owns everything, I'm sure they'll cut us a nice deal. Once we just cut everyone's taxes enough. Once we cut everyone's taxes enough, finally these corporations are going to say, okay, we can make things less expensive now. You know what I mean? Hello, I'm here from the state. Lower your prices. You're saying, oh, wow, the cost of milk and eggs and dairy products and fruit and vegetables has gone up so much. Guess what? No, it hasn't. Lower your prices. Why can't we do that? Why can't we do that, folks? Why is that so hard? I don't get it. Just deflate it. I think they'd have to expropriate. Price controls would just be ignored. Well, yeah, I mean, that's ultimately... Like, and Adam Johnson was making this point on the podcast the other day. We have to start talking about inflation and start talking more about a capital strike. And how the owners of these essential goods and services, when they see people getting too much of a free ride from the government, too much social spending, and they all decide to punish people by making everything more expensive. That's a capital strike. Those are capitalists that run our society being like, no, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to like spend in a way that increases the standard of living for our workers or our customers. And why do we live in a society where the wealthy and powerful people have that kind of power over us? How is that fair? How is that democratic? That one billionaire admitted as much the other day. We'll watch that clip. I meant to watch it yesterday and I forgot. We'll watch that clip today. I got a number of clips for us to watch. First, I'm going to eat my sandwich that I'm paying fucking like $18 for. Excuse me. One moment, please. I ordered a Dagwood sandwich. I just got a Dagwoods. Should I put on some like video content or just want to watch me silently eat this sandwich while I talk with my mouth full into the microphone? What do you think? I'm good with either. I'm really hungry though, so I gotta eat this soon. I didn't eat much for breakfast. Jules, I try to tell the non-Montreal people how good Dagwoods is, but I can't quite get across to people. Did you see the chicken and waffles in food chat? No, unfortunately, that's one of the channels in the Discord that I probably do not visit enough, despite the fact that I'm always cooking and always making food. Oh, what? What? No. Ah. The hell's this? No. The Waffle House. Just got real chicken and waffles. Okay, so no, he's tagging someone. What the fuck? A waffle with some, like, white gravy and just a bunch of dry white chicken meat. No, it's not chicken and waffles. And don't you put syrup on chicken and waffles? Yeah, it's fried chicken. It's fried chicken and waffles and syrup. This is not good. No. It's definitely not boneless, skinless chicken breast. There's this version too. Jesus Christ. What are you doing to me? This is making me lose my appetite while I'm eating my lunch. A few years ago, my wife told me this is what she grew up calling chicken and waffles in Pennsylvania. I got so mad I had to go sit in my boat in the driveway. What the? I don't know. I mean, I will say this. If the chicken is like cooked decently and is not just like dry and gross, probably like a waffle with some gravy and chicken on it is probably an okay concoction. But that's not what chicken and waffles is, though. Yeah, it's almost chicken a la king. That's right. Weird. People are not doing okay. I know there's a lot of reasons to point out that people are not doing okay right now, but I think that's an underrated one. This kind of bullshit that we're seeing. Pennsylvania has fallen. The whole genre of TikToks of people making these, like, people seemingly intentionally making horrible looking food, sometimes on marble countertops, just like the island in that grocery picture. Like, I think intentionally making really bad looking shit for like viral engagement. I don't know. It's such a weird genre of video. You know what I'm talking about? There's that one person that always does it, and there's a guy filming going, "Oh wow, oh," and then she's putting like fucking nerd candies and like beef and like gravy and stuff, and going, "This is so good," and just put it like it's just the most ungodly concoctions. And there's a guy going, "Oh, oh, a hot chicken sandwich is really good." Yeah. The hot chicken sandwich, that's a Quebec culinary delicacy that I would defend to the death. Which is basically just like 2 pieces of white bread, some rotisserie chicken in the middle, gravy on top, and some peas. Green peas. That's very good. You can either do open face or with the 2 pieces of bread. This sandwich is excellent, by the way. My life is one uninterrupted search for the spiciest buffalo chicken sandwich. I couldn't help you with that, but definitely in the neighborhood that I live in, you can get a very spicy Korean chicken sandwich, which is similar but not the same thing. But like the Korean chicken that I get is I get like the spicy version. It's pretty hot, and there's like I think there's 2 extra levels of spiciness that you can get on top of that. Do you still have the shirt that you spilled Dagwood sauce on? What an experience watching that dilemma was. I don't recall that at all. I mean, I've gotten sauce on a lot of shirts. There's no denying that. I don't recall that specific incident, though. I'm pretty sure I was able to clean it. There's a unique sandwich in my region called the St. Paul sandwich. Never tried one. Is that Minnesota? Is that right? St. Louis, Missouri. The sandwich consists of an egg foo young patty made with mung bean sprouts and minced white onions, served with dill pickle slices, white onion, mayo, and lettuce between 2 slices of white bread. Interesting. Very interesting. I don't know. I would give it a try. What's that? There's this part of America where like the chow mein sandwich is like a staple on certain holidays. And they just eat this sandwich full of this like chow mein kind of glop. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think it's Ben Collins that sometimes shares those. Whatever region of America that he comes from. At one time a year, every year they have these chow mein sandwiches, which look horrible. I would probably try one. I would give it a try, but it looks not appealing. It's up in New England. Yeah, it's a chop suey sandwich. I don't know. Again, I would try pretty much anything. You know? July 4th. On July 4th, he does every year, he posts a chop suey sandwich in Salem, Massachusetts. With a bunch of slop. I don't know. No, it's a no. So far, it's a no from the chat. It's a big no. I would try it. Like I said, I would try pretty much anything. It does not look appealing, though. The classic chow mein cookout on 4th of July. Everyone knows this tradition. Yeah, it's the worst thing to ever happen to Salem. Absolument pas. I'd try it. This sandwich that I'm currently eating, though, is great. It's exactly what I needed. I'm going to be finished soon, then we can get down to business. Who watched Collateral last night in the Discord server? That was fun. I love Collateral so much. I was happy to be able to Vincent pill some of the members of this community. There's a lot you could say about St. Louis, but from what I know, they're extremely underrated in the uniqueness of cuisine. I would love to go to some of these places in America where I've never spent any time and check it out. Even just from a cultural standpoint, but just even specifically just from a culinary standpoint. I always love how genuinely miffed his character is at some of Jamie Foxx's behavior that really offends his weird sense of honor and pragmatism. Yeah, he's like very nihilistic, total like refusal to recognize basic humanity. Maybe Vincent is neurodivergent. Have we explored that angle? Maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's wrong to criticize him for killing so much. It's because he's neurodivergent and he doesn't understand this concept of humanity. I am a hitman, Dr. Han. Probably don't need to say this, but just in case that came across as insensitive, I am neurodivergent myself. And I'm not suggesting, just so in case this is totally clear, I'm not suggesting that all neurodivergent people are potential mass murderers. I don't think anyone was taking away from what I was saying. Just so that's totally clear, I do not believe that. Sorry, can't get mad. I too am not neurodivergent. Exactly. It's my get out of jail free card. I'm allowed to speculate on this and make these kinds of japes and jokes. And you're not allowed to be mad. Well, that was fantastic. That was everything that I was looking for. That was absolutely everything that I was looking for in a sandwich. I still see in the other screen the chow mein sandwich. Or what is it? Chop suey sandwich. Are you craving Dagwoods? Well, I am an influencer. That's the thing. That's what I do. That's how I operate. Love the Sandwiches of History Instagram account. I don't think I know that one. Don't know if I'm familiar with that Old Dutch. The techno song from the Fever Club scene in Collateral is now stuck in my head. Which Marty, aka Outrun, immediately clocked. I got to tell my mom the story of Andy Kaufman wrestling in Memphis. Oh, that's great.
Is that how they talk in Memphis, Tennessee, Mr. Lawler? Huh?
Amazing. Gets me every time. You know what kind of sandwich I would really like to try is the Italian dip sandwich that they talk about, that they show in the first season of The Bear. I would really like to try one of those. Those seem really interesting to me. When I'm in Chicago, I'm gonna have to have one. I really do. I really enjoyed The Bear, but I think people pointing out also just like it's kind of like the whole idea of closing down their like working class greasy sandwich place and opening this like high-end restaurant, like fancy. They're like gentrifying their own neighborhood. There's kind of like a weird element of that. They're turning their like all greasy sandwich spot, beloved neighborhood institution into this like fancy kind of new gourmet experience. If I lived in that neighborhood, I'd probably be kind of pissed. I'd be like, I want my sandwiches back. What is this? I guess they said on the show that they were going to continue making the sandwiches, but that would probably not, even though you're rooting for the protagonists of the show kind of by default, if I actually lived in that neighborhood where it was taking place, I probably wouldn't be that happy about it. Those sandwiches look really good. The bear has gone woke. I'd like to also be able to afford them, but that would be nice, yeah. Unfortunately, if the neighborhood gentrified around them, that would probably be the better way to survive. Maybe. Maybe. Now I want a sandwich. I gotta say, my sandwich I had was tremendous. If you end up getting a sandwich because of watching this stream, if I influenced you to eat a sandwich, sound off in the comments about what sandwich you're gonna get. Does the bear take place in a specific neighborhood? I think so. I'm not like a Chicago guy, so I probably would not be the one to comment. I've been to Chicago, but only a couple of times and not for a while, so I couldn't really say. But I mean, that whole process of like looking at all the places going out of business and the gentrification, that's like a part of the storyline, definitely, of the show. It really is a sad phenomenon, actually, that it documents in The Bear, but something that's going on in a lot of our cities, a lot of our neighborhoods. These like beloved institutions that have been open for like decades, serving these communities, all like shutting down. You know, it's happening a lot. It's happened in Montreal. Fucking Main Diner shut down. It's my favorite place in Montreal. Main Diner. I've had so many amazing memories from eating at Main Diner, and that's shutting down. It's so depressing. It was the best smoked meat sandwich in the city. And when I used to go there in like 20 years ago, in 2005 or so, a little less than 20 years ago, I would get the barbecue beef ribs. They had a barbecue beef rib special. It was like $8.95 for this big thing of like gigantic beef ribs with this like sweet kind of molasses sauce on it. This fall apart, melt in your mouth beef rib with this sweet molasses sauce with French fries, a pickle, coleslaw, and a drink, and it was like $9. And it was like probably my favorite thing to eat in the entire city. And that meal at Main Diner the last time I went when it was open was like $25. And now Main is just closed. It's so sad. You know, these places become neighborhood institutions. Some of them have been open for generations. A chief Italian beef with sweet bell peppers and melted mozzarella toasted on the broiler. That sounds so fucking good. Even though I just ate a large sandwich, I could probably make room for one of those, really, if it came down to it right now. The good part about living in Edmonton is we don't have local places. That actually doesn't sound good to me, though. Makes me think of Cosmos. I still eat at Cosmos pretty often. I would be devastated if Cosmos one day closed. Cosmos just seems like it's eternal, though. Cosmos can't close. I think it's like I refuse to accept that possibility from ever happening. You know? I like how Cosmos is the exact same as it was in like 1978. It's a greasy, grimy counter with like 9 chairs, a bunch of boxes and shit strewn around. I still go there all the time. It's great. You get the banter going with the server and all the people at the counter. Fantastic stuff. We have a great sandwich spot. Then Guy Fieri put them on his show, and they expanded and went out of business. And go, awesome, good. Probably gonna have a nice, humble toasted tomato sandwich with a shot loaf of mayo. I'm not totally sure what that you're referring to, but that sounds great. One of those sandwiches is great with just white bread, some mayo, maybe a slice of American cheese, some salt and pepper on the tomato. Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, Cosmos is the best. The potatoes are so good. They have this greasy grill with a big pile of potatoes. It's like they're not even really hash browns anymore. It's like almost more mashed because it's just this big pile of like potatoes and onions and butter just all day kind of stewing together. And when you get your breakfast, they give you a big glop of the potatoes on there. Oh man. Oh baby. That's very good stuff. There's a wicked greasy spoon outside Wakefield. Utterly iconic. So many iconic bands went there when they just started touring. The Redbeck Diner. I'll remember that one. If I'm ever out Wakefield Way, I'll remember that. It's funny because I ate my big sandwich and I'm still talking about food. We're still on food chat. Oh man, my favorite place in Montreal closed too, Rotisserie Romados, Old Dutch. It's so funny that you mentioned Romados. I've eaten there so many times. Because I used to live in the plateau. I lived a 5-minute walk away from Romados for 10 years of my life. And I ate there so much. And again, talk about prices as well. It used to be $5. It used to go and get $5. It would be $5 for the quarter chicken, the salad, and the fries with the spicy sauce on it. And they had this like seasoning on the fries too, which was really good. And the chicken was just unbeatable. I ate at Ramados was one of my spots for years. Also closed. Very depressing. I don't think it is. No, I think it closed. Hey Brian, how's it going? It says on Google it's open still. Actually, not come to think of it, I had a friend that was in town the other day that mentioned they were going there. I think at one point there was a fire. Maybe it closed and reopened. It's open. They said they were going to close at the start of the pandemic and stayed open. Okay. There we go. I should go now to celebrate this fact that I thought this place, this institution, this place that holds a special spot in my heart and my memories. I thought it was closed and now I realize that it wasn't. So maybe I need to go and check it out, even though it's kind of all the way across town now because I moved. But I should go have some Ramados. I remember, like, if you went there years ago, Old Dutch, or even you, yeah, I guess, Jules, if you just discovered it more recently, then you might not know, but there was, like, the woman that was, like, the grill master there for years and years who eventually retired. I think I remember, I know her actual name was, I think maybe it was Maria. Me and my roommates at the time, though, just always called her Mama Ramados. And she would be so happy to see us, giving her our chicken. We'd say, "Muito picante," because it's Portuguese. Muito picante. She'd get so happy, giving us our spicy sauce. Mama Ramadas. She was wonderful. She was like a member of my own family. Yeah, exactly, Old Dutch. You know what I'm talking about. The old lady would take orders and always ask if you want hot sauce with that, and then blow you some kisses. Exactly. She was very sweet. Very sweet lady. I hope she's doing okay. Roman Dose is on skip. Jules is like finding out some life-changing information today. We're going to have to move on from food chat eventually. This has almost been an hour of food chat. I veered into political territory earlier talking about inflation and stuff. And now I'm just like talking about restaurants that I have been to in Montreal. It really is one of the very best food cities, though, in the world, really. Definitely in North America. I just started my diet. I don't know. I think if you get the chicken and maybe you skip the fries, if you just have the chicken and the salad, that's probably not that bad. Yeah, Bourdain did seem to think so. More of you folks just need to move here. This is a problem. Not enough people realize that you can simply just move here. You can just move to Montreal. It's one of the best places in the world to live. Language stuff is a little bit frustrating. How's the rent? It's probably cheaper than just about anywhere in Canada. Even though it's going up. It's going up, but like in comparison to Toronto even, like my apartment that I live in would probably be 3 times as much in Toronto. One last thing about Ramados, the pastel de natas are incredible. Is that those little like custard pastries? Is that what you're talking about, Old Dutch? Because I think I know exactly what you're referring to. Those little pastries with it's almost like a creme brulee kind of thing. Yes, yes. Those are excellent. I agree. Yeah. What restaurants would you say are can't miss for a visitor? Well, like what do you want like a high-end dining experience? Like, what are you looking for? I don't really go to like fancy restaurants very much. Like my food and restaurant loving friends often go to L'Express. So if you want that kind of an experience, I would maybe say L'Express. La Banquise does do a good poutine. It depends on where you are too. Like Chalet Barbecue in NDG does really like the best rotisserie chicken, and I would really recommend going there, honestly, depending on where you are. But Chalet Barbecue is really cool, and it's got like none of the decor has changed in like decades. You go inside and it's all the wood paneling inside. Really, really good, like rotisserie chicken and gravy and fries and other stuff like that. Yeah, they're the weird diners with topless waitresses and blacked out windows. I've never actually been to one of those either. I imagine they still exist though. That is a thing. I can't say that I've ever participated in that though. I found out in the PNW, especially around Seattle, they have topless coffee diners. I don't think I understand the appeal of that. Even the whole like, isn't there a whole kind of culture of like strip club breakfast buffets and stuff like that? That's just something that I can't really wrap my mind around, you know? I guess for some people that are into that kind of thing, okay. For me, not. I can't really fathom a time that would be appealing to me. It's not really uniquely American. I mean, Montreal does have like a big sort of like underbelly, seedy underbelly of strip clubs and that kind of stuff. I think to the point that it's been toned down a little bit. Like I remember when I was a kid, like going on St. Catherine Street and seeing all the different strip clubs and being like, whoa, my goodness, like what the hell's going on here? What's this? Maybe I just don't notice anymore, but seeing like super sex in the middle of the street, like across from the movie theater. Like, it's kind of funny how all that stuff is right in our sort of downtown. Sometimes I kind of forget about that. You get used to seeing it around and you're like, oh, that's not really normal, is it? I think Praxid, I think that's where I'm at as well. Food and horny are just totally separate states of being for me. Maybe I'm built different. I don't think so. I think that's like that's like a fairly understandable. I don't have a top 3 strip clubs. I've never been, despite living here in like the strip club capital of North America, besides like Vegas, probably. It's never been part of my lifestyle really in any way. Go to Cinema L'Amour. I used to live like right around the corner from Cinema L'Amour. I mean, Cinema L'Amour and Ramados are like a 5-minute walk from one another. Cinema L'Amour is up on Duluth. I lived there for years. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that building where Cinema L'Amour is was where Houdini was punched in the stomach, where he later died. I believe that's the building where that happened, that famous incident. Yeah, that happened. That was in Montreal. And I believe that was the building. I always want to watch porn in the cinema with 15 other people. It's funny to think about, like, in the dawn of the sort of porn age when that was a big thing. New York City and everything, all the porn theaters. Weird kind of subculture. That's where Paul Rubens was arrested in a porn theater, which disrupted his whole career. It seems weird to have porn theaters and then arrest people that go to them for public indecency too. That seems like a weird kind of entrapment. America is so weird and puritanical like that, isn't it? It's simultaneously exploitative and puritanical. You can go into you can have a big like neighborhood full of porn theaters, but the people that go in there are going to be harassed and arrested by the police for being perverted. Yeah, it wasn't an AMC. It was at a pornographic film theater. And I'm not, whatever. That's not something that I could ever see being a very enjoyable experience, but it seems a little weird to have pornographic movie theaters as part of your society, but also to arrest the people that go to these legal establishments. Allowing a hunk off theater and then arresting people for hunking off. That seems a little weird to me. What a place. Thou shalt not goon. Thou shalt not hunk. I don't think I've ever said honking off before in my life. Oh, yeah, and the Vice and the police were working with those places. I mean, absolutely, of course. Oh, you have an honk in there? Are you a Cafe Olympico or Club Social guy? Is that still a thing? I like the coffee at Social better. I've just never been like a fancy coffee or cafe guy. Like, I know in the Plateau, like what you're talking about with Olympico and everything, some of the very best like cafes that you can find anywhere for coffee and pastries and that stuff, but I've just never been a big like coffee guy. I'll just drink whatever. I was never really even when I lived in that neighborhood for years, I never really went to those places that much. Well, eventually we're going to have to talk about some serious shit, I guess. Going on an hour here. Going on an hour of food chat here. Sometimes it works, though. Sometimes it works. I am going to get a little fizzy water, though. I'll be right back. We talk about snake emojis and how problematic your posture is. Oh boy. You can get canceled. I don't think my posture is very good, but I don't have any wood to knock on. I guess I can knock on the wood of my hitting stick. Even though I have a lot of physical issues in my feet and my ankles and my knees, my back still seems to be okay. If I start having persistent back pain, I'm really not going to be happy. I'm sure that day is going to come eventually. That's why I don't want to jinx it. So far, my back seems to be doing all right, though. If I get to a point where I got that going on too, I'm going to be really not doing well, honestly. I'm going to be in significant physical discomfort if I get to that point. You should come back, Old Dutch. If you come back to Montreal, we'll hang out. I highly recommend doing a little stretching routine every day. I know that would really help. I know exercising more and stretching more would really help. I do have some physical issues. Fuck, folks. I gotta just go get a checkup and get some kind of diagnosis about my various, health issues. I need, a whole physical checkup, and I need a mental checkup as well. And I've just been postponing both of these things indefinitely for probably years now. It's really not good. It's not a good way of going about your business. This weird burning sensation that I'm choosing to ignore out of fear. That's how I deal with my medical issues. That's how I deal with my my medical issues. I'm just not going to think about that. I'm just not going to think about that until it gets to be completely unbearable. And even then, it's going to be a question about whether I do anything about it. We'll see, folks. Getting older. It's not fun. It's not cool. There's something wrong with my body. It's none of my business. That's right. Just ignore it till it goes away. Ugh. Well, I don't know. Maybe I can transition to doing some kind of video content or maybe looking at something now. I guess it's fun. It's always fun to shoot the shit with you folks. I do enjoy it, and there would be nothing wrong with me just sitting. I would have no problem just sitting here for the next 2 hours and talking about whatever. But that's not the TRRS that people come here for. We have to get down to business at some point and talk about some serious stuff. I kind of like it. Get a lot of freedom to be grumpy and belligerent. Honestly, I'm pretty happy being in my 40s. Honestly, if I was not having these physical problems, I'd probably feel a whole lot better about it. But that's a big but, though. That's a big but. And sometimes I like big butts. And I cannot lie. Like the CEO that gives Justin Ling's 5 head a run for its money. We gotta watch that. There's some crazy Ukraine stuff as well that we have to get into. Where now Ukraine is basically openly threatening to do terrorist attacks. Probably, you think that's maybe something we should pay attention to? You think maybe it's a problem that we're continuing this never-ending funding and arms transfer now that they're openly threatening to do terrorist attacks? Maybe it's time to pump the brakes on that or reevaluate some things about that, but apparently not. I don't know. Let's see how to get into this here. Ukraine's attacking Crimea as well. Well, there must be a video. We watched a little video on DPRK and Putin and I think it's probably worth taking a look at that. This increasing military and political ties between DPRK and Russia. And maybe that can be a way to get into some of this Ukraine talk. Okay. The new axis of evil, exactly, emerging. Let's look at the CBC coverage of this.
Video into us this morning of North Korea's Kim Jong-un as he stepped out of his armored train to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is a rocket launching site in Siberia, the location for a summit, which has come together quickly and is happening at a time when Kim's regime appears to be stepping up provocative missile tests. Putin at this time is defiant in persecuting Russia's war on Ukraine. Let's bring in Abby Kugathasan, who continues to update us on the new developments. What's been happening at the summit since we last spoke, Abby?
Heather, that 40-second handshake kick-started the talks between Putin and Kim this morning. Russia quite literally rolling out a red carpet for the North Korean leader as he got off his armored train. And the location sending a very clear message. They met at the Cosmodrome, Russia's most important domestic satellite launch center. Putin even led a tour, and Kim was seen asking a Russian official several questions about rockets. Now, analysts believe North Korea is not only seeking economic aid, but is also eyeing access to Russian advanced technology and expertise to further develop its military capabilities. Now, Pyongyang had 2 failed satellite launch attempts this year. And when
the whole thing about the private train is funny too, his private armored train. It's like, you know that people have like private planes, right? Like in our society, it's actually a pretty common thing. His private armored train. It's like it's all designed to make him sound like a supervillain, right? It's all designed to feed into that like Team America World Police view of like the Kim family and DPRK. Yeah, the climate summit, all the leaders arriving by all the world leaders arriving to the climate summit by private plane. And the DPRK mysterious, violent, hostile DPRK leader arrives by private armored train. Like describing it like it's like a G.I. Joe action figure or something. Trudeau's private plane just fell apart in India this week. Is that true? I didn't know that. That's funny. It's sick, actually, to have an armored train when you're the leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Couldn't agree more.
Putin was asked if his country would help North Korea with its satellites, he said, "That's why we came here." I spoke with Oxford professor Edward Howell this morning. He explained both leaders were very keen to put on a show for a watching world.
Denuclearization is not on the table. Money is on the table, and arms and munitions, going both ways, are on the table. The images, the videos that we're seeing, the statements that have been made, they target international audiences, particularly the US, particularly the West, and the US allies in Northeast Asia, South Korea and Japan.
Kim said he supports Russia's invasion of Ukraine, calling it a sacred fight against hegemonic forces. Putin wants arms for that war, even unreliable North Korean ones, says Professor Howell. And it was back in July, Heather, when another tour took place when Kim showed off his country's weapons to Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu.
That's a funny way of framing things as well, isn't it? It's like when you talk about the idea that DPRK might, number one, support Russian war in Ukraine, which they view, again, as well as many millions of people around the world do view as a struggle between Russia and NATO proxy war. I mean, whether you like it or not, that's a widespread view throughout the world, not just in DPRK. But there's this whole idea that like they're even thinking about supplying weapons to Russia to wage this war. Can you believe, like, and like framing it like that, right? The idea is just so unthinkable. I mean, even with China, they've got these kind of accusations as well, but now they're doing the same thing with DPRK. They're even considering supplying weapons to Russia in this war. But it's like, we're supplying weapons to one side of the war, but that's okay, though. They're the good guys, so it's actually not a problem for us to send 2 years worth and billions of dollars worth of weapons to wage one side of this war. But like, they're thinking about supplying weapons to the Russians. And it's like zero cognitive dissonance. Like the amount of people, I mean, talking about America's like it's an arms dealer masquerading as a country. That's like America's primary role, is to sell arms to not just the Ukrainians, but to sell arms all over the world. And you might not agree with the Russian war in Ukraine, which is, I get that. But the idea that it's somehow completely out of bounds for a nation around the world that's been a victim for years of both military imperialism and economic imperialism as well. Like actual warfare and then decades of economic warfare after that. It's actually kind of understandable that they would have a view that like when Russia is engaged in this proxy struggle against the very people that did this to their nation, that they're going to back Russia on that. Why is anyone confused about why that's going on? Or why are we suggesting that's somehow like illegal to do? That's a good way of looking at it, yeah. Our righteous depleted uranium and their dastardly, unreliable North Korean weapons. That's right. Our justified and legal and cool cluster munitions. That's just totally A-okay. USA shell production 15 to 20K a month, EU 4K a month, Russia 250K a month. And you point that out, Siporusky, and it's like Russia's not even in full like wartime economy either. Like that's why they've referred to this always as a special military operation and not it's not like this full-scale war that they're orienting their entire society or economy around. That's an interesting thing, though. It's actually that has been exposed by this conflict, which is that we don't even have, even despite the huge amount of energy and resources we put towards like arms manufacturing, we don't even really have the ability anymore to give the Ukrainians the amount of arms they would need to actually compete in this war. Our ethical switchblade drones, exactly. Our ethical knife bombs. I mean, it's crazy just when you look at our media and in social media as well, how normalized and okay the idea of like killing Russians is. And that like we can make weapons to kill Russians, we can have proxies kill Russians, that's all okay. But when there's someone that, sees Russia's conflict right now as being a conflict against the West, against NATO, against US imperialism, when they contribute to that war effort, we're like, oh, so evil, such evil. Does US even have steel production capacity for war without Chinese steel? Well, I mean, that's why we're seeing this decoupling taking place in this effort to reindustrialize certain parts of America, because probably the people that want war with China know correctly that like they are not equipped at all to wage one.
Abby, both Russian
That's also
President
why you're forcing
Putin
Germany and
and
Japan
North
to triple
Korea's
their defense
Kim,
budget.
they're
Absolutely.
being isolated by the West, and their regimes are heavily targeted by sanctions. So officials from the West will be watching this very closely, where you are in London, in Washington, other Western capitals. Have we heard any official reaction there so far?
There is concern about this meeting. We know that South Korea and Japan watching very closely, especially after North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles just a short time before this meeting in Russia's Far East. And China is watching too. Professor Howell says it's likely that Beijing communicated with Kim before the trip. He says China wants to see stability on the Korean peninsula and would prefer the status quo when it comes to North Korea's nuclear capabilities. Previously, the United States did warn that these 2 countries were looking to lock up an arms deal. If that happens, it would violate UN sanctions.
We must
I don't know if they care about sanctions right now
Russia,
anymore.
Only 6-7 years
ago, you can't sanction DPRK more. They're already maximum sanctioned.
Multilateral UN sanctions resolutions on North Korea's nuclear program. This meeting perhaps highlights quite clearly that Russia is now no longer going to do this.
Putin has said Russia would comply with its international obligations. Analysts will point out, Heather, Putin's actions don't always align with his words.
Abby Kugathasan from London. Thank you, Abby, this morning.
We need a new system. We need a new society. We need to demand that which may have sounded impossible even a few weeks ago. Because of rampant speculation in the U.S. media that Putin and Kim Jong-un were going to meet, as if that would be, which you can find at geopoliticaleconomy.com. Ben Norton, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's a pleasure.
Big news today. I mean, we knew for, the last few weeks, because of rampant speculation in the U.S. media, that Putin and Kim Jong-un were going to meet, as if that would be like some terrible, menacing event. Of course, the 2 countries share a border. Russia borders North Korea, as does China.
Said no.
But now that Putin is meeting with Kim Jong-un in Russia, we learned that Maduro is meeting with Xi Jinping.
Sorry, I don't know if Marty's still around. Marty, can you sound off if you're still here? I just remembered the part in Collateral last night when Detective Fanning meets his untimely fate there. And Marty's comment at the time, isn't there someone you forgot to ask? That popped me. I was really laughing at that. That's a great moment.
And Xi Jinping announced in a very dramatic statement that Venezuelan-China relations have been elevated to a strategic partnership. But let's start with the meeting with Putin
Venezuela
and Kim Jong-un.
Meeting is interesting as well.
I want to get your take, its significance. And here we have a clip, I think, of the 2 of them meeting. And by the way, Kim Jong-un's statement is very straightforward. He's saying, you won't be able to hear this on the clip, but he's saying, we support Russia. We support Russia's efforts to fight against the hegemonism of imperialism.
I can't believe DPRK
we stand with
that.
Russia against imperialism. Very militant statements. And of course, North Korea was one of the 7 countries at the UN that voted no on the US-sponsored resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Anyway, your take.
Yeah, I think this is very important for a variety of reasons. One, the short-term response here is clearly that this is a direct message to the United States after U.S. President Biden just met with the leaders of South Korea and Japan. And we should keep in mind that the current leader of South Korea is referred to in the Korean media as K-Trump. He has modeled his political career after Trump, Yoon Suk-yeol, and he has tried to push Korean politics very far to the right after the previous president, Moon Jae-in, tried to pursue peace with the North. And potentially, there was an attempt that came very close to finally achieving peace on the Korean Peninsula, which has been militarily occupied by the United States since the early 1950s. The United States killed around 3 million Koreans in a brutal war, and the U.S. destroyed about 80% of all of the buildings through its bombing campaign in the northern part of Korea. So this is a peninsula that has been essentially at war since the 1950s, the South militarily occupied by the United States. And Joe Biden, who claims to be a force for progress in the world and criticizes Donald Trump rightfully, well, he has no problem allying with Donald Trump-like figures in other countries like South Korea. And of course, Japan has essentially been a one-party state since the 1950s as well.
One sec, folks.
Ruled by the so-called Liberal Democratic Party, which is also a very right-wing party. And Fumio Kishida, the prime minister, likewise shares many of these extreme views, including Japan is pushing toward remilitarizing, writing the history of Japanese fascism in World War II. In fact, the Japanese government on its official Twitter account recently posted this ridiculous propaganda saying that brave Japanese soldiers died fighting in faraway lands to defend our motherland in World War II, whitewashing the genocidal atrocities that Japan committed in collaboration with Nazi Germany. So we see that the United States is very clearly trying to form this kind of cordon sanitaire around China, economically, politically, and militarily. The United States has formed multiple military alliances, not only with Japan and South Korea, but the United States also is working closely with a new government in the Philippines, led by Bongbong Marcos, the son of the longtime U.S.-backed dictator Ferdinand Marcos. And what we now see is that the United States is trying to put offensive missile systems, not defensive, offensive missile systems aimed at mainland China on the so-called first island chain surrounding China. And Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, these countries play a key role in this military strategy. So immediately, I think the first thing to point out is that by meeting with the leader of the DPRK, the official name of North Korea, Russia is signaling not only that it's not going to abide by the Western sanctions on the DPRK, but furthermore, that Russia is interested in military collaboration with this country, whereas the United States is forming this military alliance with Japan and South Korea, Russia and China are likely going to have military exercises with the DPRK, and Russia and China have also recently held military exercises.
I did find it funny the other day when Biden had that joint meeting with the leaders of Japan and South Korea, and it was framed in the media as being some big diplomatic victory. Oh, look at Biden. He's meeting with Japan and South Korea at the same time. Look how strong he's looking on the world stage. It's yeah, literally getting your junior partners in your global imperialist web here. Your vassal states. Really, it's really impressive. The president of the United States coming and summoning his vassals to meet with him. Yeah, the empire leader is meeting with his lapdogs in the region. Wow, that's really impressive. Stop the presses. Look at this big diplomatic victory. That's the leader of the empire coming to visit with the vassal states. It's really great. How impressive that must be.
Exercises with Iran. So this is responsive to the aggressive threats by the United States in the region, which is further militarizing the region. But another key point is simply Russia diplomatically is stating on the international stage that they're not going to abide by this Western, arrogant imperialist idea that some countries are persona non grata and you're not allowed to have any relations with them. You mentioned, Brian, that the DPRK is a country that shares a border with Russia. It also shares a border with China. And we see that China-DPRK relations have been improving as well.
Yeah, they tried to bring in Vietnam. Vietnam was like, no, that's okay.
Especially in the 1990s and the 2000s.
That's really good, too. It's there's been a lot of history and conflict between China and Vietnam, despite having sometimes similarly socialist governments. But there's been, there's centuries of a relationship there, and a kind of many times a conflict and a hostility. So it's really good, I think, the fact that they're starting to be able to, I think, work through some of these issues and seeing their common ground and their common vision and their common goals, despite the big vast differences in the culture and the history. Yeah, and it was cool that Vietnam elected not to be part of that group of vassal states, despite meeting with Biden.
Power essentially tried to say that countries around the world cannot have relations with other independent sovereign states like the DPRK, like Eritrea, like Iran, like Cuba. And increasingly, many countries are saying this is absolutely absurd. We are not going to abide by this policy of blockade, which is really a form of collective
and
punishment
they couldn't
against
object.
the entire
No one
North
could
Korean
object to this in a
population.
world where there's a
People love to make up
unipolar
crazy
system.
propaganda about how supposedly evil the DPRK government is. Well, regardless of what you think about the government, the point is that that tens of millions of people are suffering under what is essentially a blockade. They've been under a blockade for decades, and that has made their lives
feudalism.
more and more difficult.
It's like been a feudalistic siege on DPRK
larger
for
countries
decades.
like Russia and China are now actually opposing this blockade, which unfortunately very few countries were willing to do until recently.
Or very few Western individuals with independent media platforms.
A trend of a new day in global politics, and I want to help the audience just understand some of the historical context. And you brought some of that into your initial comment, Ben. Putin met with Kim Jong-un in 2019, so that was 4 years ago. But Russia, and when it was the anchoring republic of the USSR, the Soviet Union, had very, very close relations with the DPRK. When the Soviet Union occupied the northern half.
It's very similar to Africa. Why are all these African nations, why do they all like the Russians? I want to make deals with the Russians. I want to have increased political ties and military ties and economic ties with Russia. Why is that? It must be because of like Russian disinformation that's convincing people to like them for no reason and just ignoring the entire history of the relationship between Russia as a part of the Soviet Union and Africa and Korea. It's the same thing. Why is DPRK having this relationship with Russia? Like, again, they share a border. They share this commonality. They share a history. Like, they fought wars together. DPRK probably doesn't exist without the aid of the Russians. Of course, there are these deep ties between DPRK and with Russia and around these, and between Russia and Africa and between DPRK and African countries as well. DPRK supported a lot of these anti-colonial movements. And built big monuments, big like anti-colonial monuments in Africa, which are actually very cool. But again, it's this refusal to acknowledge history that people have, and then they look around at these events and they're just mystified. I find that very fascinating. I think we talk about that a lot. You know, it's not just about this. It's like the whole Belt and Road Initiative and the whole thing we talk about often. That one speech, which I will never forget, of that one American official being like, why? We just don't know. Why is Latin America making deals with China and not us? We're offering them aid and they're saying, no, thank you. We would like to make this deal instead. Why? It's a mystery. I just have no answers. It's this amazing. Why are they so hesitant when we offer help? It's like, it's truly amazing, honestly. Like I think when you talk about these American officials and people that get to that point, you know, it's like, it's not even that they're self-censoring or that they've been brainwashed, but they really believe the bullshit about America. You know what I mean? They're true believers. They're true believers, and they just have no understanding of history. And they can't, when you really don't understand the history of the last 80 years of America and how that's been viewed by the rest of the world, and you don't, as we talk about often, the violence of imperialism just seems to be invisible or hidden from you, or they just don't acknowledge it. Like, I don't think these people are liars. I genuinely think they don't see it. They're really true believers. So when you are and you don't understand that history, or you believe the bullshit fake American version of history that people have been fed, or at the very least they think, oh, we've made some mistakes in the past, but those are all that's all in the past now. We don't do that anymore. That's maybe the most as some people's criticisms are able to go. But when you have this viewpoint of history, it makes these things mystifying. Russia making alliances with these African nations, or DPRK and Russia talking to one another, or Latin America not wanting the help and aid from or Africa as well, not wanting help and aid from America in the West. It's just mystifying. It's really amazing. I think that's the really fascinating thing to me about like historical materialism. And then when you start understanding history through that lens, it just feels like you're living in a different dimension from everybody else. And you see these kinds of situations where people just are looking around and scratching their heads at these things which are very clear and have very, very obvious and understandable historical underpinnings. And you look around and see people and they just don't get it. It's because they don't have that viewpoint of history, which is the correct viewpoint, by the way, which is the correct viewpoint to have. It is like putting on the they live glasses. It really is. North Korea running old steam tractors on wood is completely rational and more sustainable than most of what goes on in the West. Well, actually, it's quite interesting to look into like urban planning and infrastructure and transit in Korea, because they've had to make some decisions because of the way that they've been cut off from the global economy, because they literally can't have car culture. They can't have a situation where everyone has a car, and that's the infrastructure that you're building. So because of these limitations, they've innovated a lot in transit and housing and energy and ways to like get resources to people, but in way more sustainable ways. And we don't talk about it enough because they're just the personification of evil. They're just evil, and this evil hermit of pseudo monarchy. Like that's what people think across the political spectrum. Conservatives, liberals, social democrats, anarchists, like they all have this view. But then when you have a different view as soon as you start understanding geopolitics and history through this lens of historical materialism. Use trains and buses because it's easier to propagandize your population that way. That's right. Yeah. And of course, people are just getting out and pushing them, that kind of thing. And who was the socialist philosopher that wrote so much and expanded this idea and made it very easy to understand, this idea of historical and dialectical materialism? Their name escapes me, but whoever that was must have been a pretty consequential socialist thinker. And when we remember the name of that individual, we'll have to give them credit for being... Imagine if someone could come up with could push forward the theory in that way while also shepherding a major nation into this like incredibly dangerous territory of World War II, keeping the whole thing together through that period, through the whole period of civil war, imperialism, and still managing to turn this backwards agrarian, illiterate backwater into this major industrial power in only a few years. And then surviving World War II and building this whole society. What an amazing accomplishment. What an objectively amazing accomplishment that is. Can you imagine if one person you could point to that really was responsible for those things? I can't imagine that either. Anyway, surely there could never be such a person. Surely. And even if this hypothetical person existed, if there were mistakes that happened, or if there were like bad things that happened, or things that we could point to that we don't agree with, surely just on the basis of those things that I've just outlined would still be one of the most consequential and important leaders of modern history. Surely. But this is all just kind of a hypothetical thought experiment. Anyways, back to the video.
Of the Korean Peninsula as part of a post-World War II agreement between the United States and the Soviet Union when they were allies. There was a decision that North Korea would be occupied. All of Korea had been occupied by Japan, but northern part of Korea would be occupied by Soviet troops, and the U.S. would occupy the southern half of the country under the 38th parallel, a relatively arbitrary decision.
It seems like Ben's trying some stuff with his
Both
backgrounds.
sides agreed that they would leave in 1948, and both sides, in fact, did leave. And then in 1950, the Korean War started, and the United States invaded Korea, along with 25 other nations from the United Nations, and over the next 3 years, as you said, millions of Koreans died. The main complaint of U.S. pilots was that there was nothing left to bomb because they had destroyed everything, and they kept bombing for another 2 years. And during that time, China sent like 1 million people to fight on the side of North Korea. That's why North Korea could persevere. But behind the scenes, Russia, the Soviet Union, was sending lots of military aid. They couldn't have done it without Soviet military aid. So the DPRK, North Korea, China, and the Soviet Union were communist-led countries, a socialist bloc at that time. They worked together. There was a division of labor, but they were coordinating. And then after the Soviet Union was overthrown, after the Soviet government was toppled in 1991, basically Russia, and I would say the same thing was happening with China, abandoned their strategic relationship with North Korea. They didn't break, it wasn't broken, but that level of solidarity between those two big countries and North Korea was basically broken. Then in 2002, on January 29th, George W. Bush, in his State of the Union address, said that there's an axis of evil in the world, Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. And everybody knew at that time that the U.S. was preparing to invade Iraq. So the North Koreans were thinking, okay,
Iran
Russia
and Iraq, who had this long history of conflict and actually hating each other, and then Korea. Like, did these nations have anything to do with one another? What a weird combo they tried. It's like a weird faction in wrestling that they try. Let's stick these three guys together and see if we can do something with that. One of these old territories. We don't know what to do with these three guys individually. Let's stick them together as a little faction and see if we can make it work. You know? That's what it feels like to me. It was New Day when there's still the gospel thing. I don't know. I would say it's more like I remember even in NXT there was this is like pretty niche, but it was but it was 10 years ago in NXT when it was Alexander Rusev, who's now Miro in AEW, when he first came out, and he was just this kind of like, I think he's Mongolian. Or actually, I can't remember. I can't remember what his background is. Not Mongolian. It's like Lithuanian. It was him. There was a faction with him and this, I can't even remember the guy's name, but he was this kind of like arrogant French model kind of character, plus Scott Dawson, who's now Dax Shepard in FTR. And it was just like the weirdest combinations of people that they just threw together in this thing, and it made no sense. That's the axis of evil. Or it's like there was that faction in WCW in the early Hogan years of WCW. But it was like all the random the something of evil. I can't even remember what the name of it was. That's what it feels like, though. That's what the fucking Bush administration with David Frum was up to. Let's just come up with some wacky stuff. Let's just throw some stuff at the wall and see what works. Demolition eventually became a three-man. It started out as just a tag team. Anyways, this extended awkward analogy we can move on from. The Hulk, Andre the Giant, let's say Yokozuna. Yeah. Very funny in retrospect. So many weird things about that era. And I love getting lectured by David Frum to this day. The same fucking guy who came up with this stupid shit is now lecturing everyone, talking about how he's like the center left. And really it's all the people on the left that are on the right now. And all these people say, thank you, David Frum, for telling us that. Sylvester Lefort and Scott Dawson. Thank you, Marty. Oh my God. I can't believe did you Google that? Or did you know that? You did not know that, did you? I was really into like NXT at that time. That was like my main wrestling thing that I watched. Okay. Weird faction. Sylvester Lefort and Scott Dawson and Rusev. That's the axis of evil to me. Why are these people together? We don't know. Let's give them something to do. Anyway.
Has basically not no longer supporting us in the way they used to. China is pretty lukewarm because China's main goal at that time was to integrate into the world economy and to be the friend of the United States. So we can't really count on them. The Bush administration is about to invade Iraq. Bush is saying we're like Iraq, so we're obviously going to be invaded next. And it was at that moment that the North Koreans left the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and began building nuclear weapons, because North Korea said, we won't be like Iraq. We won't disarm, as Iraq had been compelled to do.
Pretty understandable.
We won't disarm. In fact, we're going to get more arms. We're going to get nuclear arms.
That's actually a totally normal reaction to the Iraq War.
The United States, think you can invade or bomb us or destroy.
I mean, it's another thing that's so funny, isn't it? It's like you invade Iraq and destroy Iraq. You may come up with this catchphrase to lump in Iraq, Iran, and DPRK, all the other places you want to invade, right? You're following me? And you're invading and destroying and bombing and murdering people in one country. And then DPRK says, okay, so we're going to get some nukes then, because this seems like we're being threatened a little bit. Is it wrong that they felt threatened by that? That they get lumped into this category with these two other nations? They get referred to by the leader of the empire as the axis of evil, and then they bomb and destroy one country and where 1 million people die. And DPRK says, we're actually going to get some more weapons and nukes here and focus on our military so maybe we can avoid that same outcome. And what do we say? What are they doing? They're so violent and aggressive. These violent and aggressive Koreans getting these weapons and nuclear bombs and threatening the whole world. Unbelievable. Isn't it like, it's just remarkable to me that people are able to say these things. And really, like, people that live in America are just uncritically, unironically able to suggest that it's DPRK being aggressive when it's a really, I think, normal and understandable reaction to being deliberately threatened by the number one global military imperialist power that decades ago committed genocide in your nation and killed 3 million people. The same nation that killed 3 million people artificially partitioned your country, have sanctioned you, have blockaded you for years, lumping you into this axis of evil, bombing and destroying one of the other nations in this axis of evil. And then when they have the totally normal and understandable reaction of like, we're going to defend ourselves because this nation that has militarily partitioned our country and has been militarily occupying our southern part of our nation now for 80 years, aiming missiles at us. We're being directly threatened and provoked. So we're going to spend money on our military. We're going to have military parades. We're going to get nuclear bombs to make sure we can defend ourselves with nuclear bombs if we have to. We're going to test missiles and do other missile tests so you know that we're capable of defending ourselves. And we really have the audacity to say, these violent Koreans, unbelievable. These violent, irresponsible Koreans threatening the whole world. I never. Again, it's truly something that I think once you have that understanding of history and this understanding of our reality and geopolitics, it's just, you see that reaction to people and it's just so perplexing to me. These fiends threatening world peace, and all these movies like Team America and that fucking Seth Rogen and James Franco movie where they're just like assassinating the leader of the nation. And it's this big played for laughs moment. And we say, I can't believe they're testing weapons, saying that like we're threatening them. Or they're talking about imperialism in like scare quotes. It's wild, honestly. It is really wild that people are able to talk about DPRK like this without an ounce of self-reflection, without an ounce of like, it's just delusional. Yeah, well, me too, Matron's Militia. I mean, you watch the news, you watch TV, And you just know, obviously, that North Korea is this evil place that kills and starves people intentionally and does all these terrible things. You just know that. And you really have to start asking yourself this basic question at one point, like, why do I think this? You're even a tanky just for talking like this. I'm a progressive. That's why I think we should continue militarily occupying the country in a progressive way. Hey, what do the people in South Korea say about the decades-long U.S. military occupation? No, they like it. They love it. Don't worry about that. No, they want us to stay. Don't worry. You know, and that's the thing. When I started becoming interested in socialism, I always was like left-wing or whatever, left-leaning. But when I started actually thinking about this stuff more, I started asking myself this question. Very strange. Very strange. But yes, when you understand history in this way, it's really not hard to get it. You know, why Russia and DPRK have an alliance, why DPRK gets nuclear weapons and tests missiles and invests in their military, why these African nations are ditching the West and going with Russia. It's really, really easy to understand. But people just don't get it. That's the perplexing thing about looking around and seeing some of the commentary in our media and in social media and all these places. People just don't get it. The DPRK, as a small country which was under attack multiple times, has infinitely more right to nukes than a big country with a gigantic conventional military like the U.S. Yeah, do you like an underdog story or don't you? Anyway, let's continue this. I do have to say thank you to... These are really tricky. Franz Schubert continuing the gift sub that you got. Thank you, Franz. I don't know why those don't trigger an alert. Seems to be a little... And I will just remind people as well, while I'm taking a little pause here, going on 2 hours of this stream, but I'll just let you know I'm at 2 subs. So if you do enjoy TRRS and you enjoy tuning into this program and you enjoy the commentary and the analysis and the community and the conversation and the guests and all the cool stuff that we do here in this program, please, if you can, subscribe to TRRS. It's $5 per month. It is completely free of charge. With your Amazon Prime account, you can very easily upscale to a Twitch Prime sub. It is Slubtember. First-time subs or upgrades are on discount right now. Every little bit helps. Help me make my little number go up. Help keep the show on the air. I appreciate it a lot. We become friends, and in fact, you become a member of Twitch's only two-dimensional triangle-shaped trickle-down clout and friendship access tiered reward system, the Friendship Triangle, which you can see here. Should make a Rousseau Institute website. I actually do want the Rousseau Institute to be like a real thing. I really do. Maybe I could start getting booked on CBC if I was the head of an institute.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
TRRS Friendship Triangle.
Butt Nerd 69. Thanks for the 5 months. Butt Nerd 69. That's an underrated TRRS community name, community member name, I think. We don't hear enough about Butt Nerd 69, I think. That's good, though. Yeah, you just need a professional-looking website. Yeah, I could publish some writing on there. I could just take a Substack probably and just get a web, like a you can make it a .com or whatever. Butt Nerd, Fart Party, and Anus Beard. Yeah. We saw Anus Beard again a while ago. It's been a while. Make it a left-leaning think tank. No, that's what I want to do. I want to make it like a real think tank. And like publish papers and have like an actual official website. And eventually I want to have a conference. I want to have a Rousseau Institute for Western Destabilization official political conference. That's like pretty much my dream project. One day I hope to make that into a reality. I think you can, it's not that they offer a .com, but you can like, yeah, you can take your Substack and make it into like an official .com website. Anyway, we'll see. I'll think about it. I think it's something that I really do want to do, though. You can release official think tank polls that when you read the methodologies based on polling 14 Twitch chatters. Exactly. It's you count as representatives of the people, folks. You count. Well, I'll get back to the video now. This is, we should absolutely make a website. We need to, I would like to do some more merch as well. I would like to do a TRRS Canada is fake shirt. I would like to have a Canada is fake shirt as part of the arsenal. Old Dutch or anyone else, the design heads out there, if you can think of a cool design for a Canada is fake shirts and hoodies, I think that's one of the next projects that I would like to do. Hey, you represent your constituents, exactly. Your communities. I think I was when turning about making it into like a real official thing, I was a little leery about the whole Western destabilization thing and about how that might be just too like scary for people, but I think it's provocative. I think that's something that could get people talking. And I think that's what we need. Not even just me personally. Me in terms of like our movement. We need to get people talking. We need a different program that's getting out there that's not just the NDP program. Anyway, these are all some of my big zany ideas for things to do in the future. We'll get there eventually. Yeah, it was exactly. Trudeau said it himself. Canada is a company, as we were talking about yesterday with Matt Bors and Ben. I like a fake country with a short skirt and a long jacket. Okay. Let's continue this video now.
Destroy us, we can hit back. And so they developed nuclear weapons. They became a nuclear power. They developed missiles, long-range missiles at this point. And during that entire next 15 years, Russia and China supported the United States at the Security Council at imposing sanctions on North Korea because Russia was basically appeasing the United States, and so was China. But here we are in 2023, instead of that, era of appeasement before what appeared to be a unipolar power of the United States, the hegemony of the United States, everything is shifting back. It's a really dramatic reversal in global politics. Go ahead.
Yeah, and there's another key element here, Brian, that I've seen some economists discuss, which is also plans for integrating North Korea into the Belt and Road Initiative, China's massive global infrastructure project. And North Korea is
that
very
really activates the excitement centers in my brain hearing
that go out into the Sea of Japan, the East Sea. So there's discussions of expanding railroads so you can have the movement of goods from Russia and China to North Korea.
DPRK and Cuba and the Belt and Road Initiative.
the sea. I mean, this is all part of
That gets me
what we're
excited.
seeing is really the center of the global economy is moving back toward Eurasia. What we've really seen is in the past few hundred years with the rise of European colonialism is the emergence of this transatlantic imperial system in which so much trade goes over the Atlantic between Europe and the United States, and many countries in Asia and Africa, they send their goods to Europe, and then those goods are shipped across to the United States. What we're seeing now is part of this attempt to try to unify the continent of Eurasia economically, to integrate it with infrastructure. And China absolutely, when it comes to these strategies of trying to build infrastructure and develop economic connections, it's not thinking in just 5 years or even 10 years. It's thinking decades down. And clearly, the government of the DPRK is not going anywhere. I mean, the United States has tried decades after decades after decades to try to overthrow the government, essentially waging a kind of campaign of economic warfare or economic terrorism collectively against the entire civilian population. It hasn't worked. And Russia economically, it's a commodities powerhouse. It's one of the world's largest producers of oil and gas and certain minerals and wheat and fertilizer. But China is the core of the global economy. And by further integrating with countries like the DPRK, also with Iran, it is building this infrastructure in which the United States is no longer even necessary in any of these global supply chains. They don't even necessarily need the U.S. market, and clearly the U.S. is trying to break off the Chinese market anyway. So
Maduro had actually an interesting comment about that within his, they were doing a meeting after the meeting with Maduro and President Xi, and someone goes to start asking a question in English, and he's just like, we don't even have an English translator. We don't need to worry about this anymore. That's really what a lot of this is. With a lot of these victims of Western imperialism coming together, Venezuela, Iran, DPRK, Russia, China, and these places, and they're like, we don't need you. We're cutting you out. We don't need you anymore. We can build an alternative economic order that's completely outside of your control. We don't even need to speak English. Fuck you. It's like, that's kind of the attitude that is developing. And as I keep saying too, it's like the only way that's possible. That's not possible for that to develop in a unipolar world that's completely controlled and dominated by the US. It's just not possible. The only reason that it is possible at all is because there is now a rival to this hegemonic power, which is why I think that's something that we should be excited about, as I keep saying. This is the clip if you want to show it. Oh, thank you, Relic.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I'm the journalist from Hong Kong Phoenix TV. So my question is, you have mentioned...
没有翻译。
Habla mandarín.
Yeah.
Porque no hay traducción del inglés.
你好，我
El nuevo mundo.
Hola.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Is speak Mandarin. There's no English interpreter. It's a new world, he says. That's funny.
What's really incredible is I think we should think of this in addition to what China
the
has been doing
is failing,
recently
though.
with
It
trying
is.
to bring Iran into
failing.
the diplomatic fold in West Asian politics. Whereas, again, I mentioned that if you look at the U.S. strategy toward the DPRK for decades, it's been trying to essentially say that this is a so-called pariah state, which, I mean, the United States is the world's worst pariah state if you actually look at international law. No other country on earth comes close to violating international law as much, as frequently, as severely as the United States. And another country that the U.S. tried to pursue this policy against was Iran. You mentioned the so-called axis of evil speech, Iran, the DPRK, and Iraq. Well, China clearly was sending a message to the United States. They're not going to tolerate this attempt to say that state A is good and state B is bad by brokering a historic peace breakthrough between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And Iran recently joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. There has also been discussion of the DPRK eventually becoming a future member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So the reason I mention all of this is that thinking strategically, China and Russia, which coordinate very closely on a lot of these policies, can see clearly that their goal is unifying the region economically so they no longer need to rely on the West. And that's why China and Iran recently signed a historic agreement a 25-year agreement in which Iran provides its petroleum, and in return, China provides different goods and technical support and infrastructure development. I know today we wanted to talk about Venezuela, and I think Venezuela and China are also working on developing a similar partnership. So in the case of the DPRK, there are actually discussions. The DPRK has a lot of mineral reserves, but I don't think this is obviously is about much more than simply minerals in the DPRK. It's a much deeper partnership that these countries are looking to develop. But the point I wanted to stress is that the DPRK is an important country in Eurasia. It has an important geostrategic location, and it's a country whose government has politically shown again and again that it will not tolerate
that I'm not sure, Diego.
Its complete subordination to Western capital. This is a country that absolutely is sovereign, has defended its sovereignty, unlike, unfortunately, the south of the country, which it would probably be in the economic interest of South Korea, if it had a fully sovereign government, to integrate economically with this project of Eurasian integration. But instead, it's a country that's still militarily occupied by the United States and has been since the 1950s, and its government continues to look to the United States and not to look to its own allies, not to look to its own neighbors in Asia, which should be its natural allies.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the issue of sovereignty, because when Trump, for his own reasons, met with Kim Jong-un, both first in Singapore in 2018 and then in Hanoi in February 2019, and it looked like there might be the possibility of a peace agreement whereby the Korean War would finally come to an end. The armistice that ended the military side of the conflict on July 27, 1953, that armistice has never been replaced by a peace treaty. So technically the countries are at war, and the U.S. continues to use that as a pretext to impose these draconian economic sanctions, not only on North Korea, but on countries that do business with North Korea. So that diminishes North Korea's ability to trade. And, it's a country that is also trying to overcome the legacy of colonialism. It was dominated and colonized by Japan, brutalized by Japan. So many Koreans were basically taken to Japan to be essentially slave labor. 25% of the people who died in Hiroshima were Korean workers. When you put all of that together,
we don't talk about that enough when it comes to Hiroshima.
The people of Korea and the Korean
people talk about when you criticize Hiroshima bombings or call it a war crime, and you're just like, oh, you're defending the colonial Japanese military, and it's like, well, first of all, it's Japanese civilians that are dying, but it's also millions of Korean workers as well that were affected, or a huge amount of them, which I don't think comes up enough when we talk about Hiroshima.
Republic, they've decided that they're going to be sovereign, and the South Koreans couldn't do that. So Moon Jae-in, who was the progressive president of South Korea, when he was meeting with Kim Jong-un and they were promoting peace talks between Kim Jong-un, North Korea, and Trump, he couldn't really say, yes, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have reconciliation with North Korea. Yes, we want to end the Korean War. The policy was decided in Washington. So when the peace talks were finally sabotaged on the second day of the Hanoi summit, it wasn't a South Korean governmental leader, at that time the president of South Korea, who said no. It was Donald Trump, backed up by John Bolton and these other hawks. So South Korea is like one of the biggest economies in the world. I think it's 10th biggest economy in the world, but it's not sovereign.
Always.
U.S. military forces actually have operational control in the moment of crisis. This is an agreement between U.S. and South Korea that should there be a military crisis, South Korea's military is under the command of the Pentagon.
I misspoke. I realized that as soon as the words came out of my mouth.
When you think about
we get the
Korea as a country, I mean, if Korea was united, it would be a powerhouse. Both North and South Korea, very educated. Obviously, it would be like an economic, political powerhouse, not just in Asia, but globally.
If
I think it would be a rival or able to surpass Japan. But it's a divided country. The U.S. doesn't want to end the division. The U.S. wants to continue to occupy South Korea. And the South Korean government, even a left progressive government like Moon Jae-in was before the current government, which is right-wing, as you said, they don't really have sovereignty.
They're militarily occupied.
That's absolutely right. And I think another really
this is the amazing thing, like what I was saying.
Oh,
no, don't worry. The South Koreans want us there. No, they like capitalism. They love America. They've been militarily occupying. Like, I don't think we think about this is one of like the colonial mentality that I think we don't grasp sometimes. The idea of having a foreign hostile power militarily occupying you, like not figuratively but literally in your capital city, a like 6-block radius massive military base of foreign military soldiers that just live in your city, in your nation for generations at a time. It's really amazing to think about. Is literally militarily occupied, but we've convinced ourselves that no, they like it. Don't worry. So same with Japan, same with Philippines. No, they want that. They want the Americans there. And I know there's been decades of propaganda efforts and like pumping billions of dollars into these places to try and like increase the standard of living precisely to like allow that kind of situation to continue. But so I'm not saying that every single person there is against it, but many people are. When you talk about Okinawa, especially, is another example. There's constant in Seoul. There's one place, and in Okinawa as well, constant protests and people demanding that the U.S. leave. But we just don't hear about that. We say no, don't worry. The Japanese want us there. They like being militarily occupied by America. The South Koreans want us there. They know that America's protecting them from the evil regime to the north. You see, It's really amazing to think about, and we don't, because none of us have ever lived in that kind of context. It's so hard to wrap our minds around being militarily occupied by a foreign military force for decades and decades and generations, and we just say, of course they like that. They think it's cool, but it's like, is that true though? Like I was saying before, when people compare South Korea to the North and talk about it's this big capitalist success story, just look at any art that's being made in South Korea right now and what the attitude is towards capitalism and the United States military occupation. These are not people that are thrilled to still be being forced to being put in this situation economically or politically or militarily. And yet we're part of it as occupiers as well. And Canadian troops committed crimes in South Korea, to say nothing of what we contributed to in the North, but there were Canadian troops murdering people and raping women in South Korea, like during the war. What's cool is central planning and democratic centralism. I agree with that. Anyway, it's interesting to think about, and I think that's one thing that's part of deprogramming yourself from the sort of like Western colonial mentality, is understanding that that's like what we enforce on people living around the world, like what the kind of things we enforce on them, and then we suggest that like this is just the natural order of things. They want America there. They want these military bases in their nation, without anyone ever trying to put themselves into the shoes of a nation and what that's like. We're always talking about that down at the skate park. That's right. I hear the same things myself when I'm hanging out there, which is often.
Political economy of South Korea itself and the very lopsided, uneven development that we've seen. South Korea is often singled out as one of the great Asian tigers, and the narrative by Western neoliberals is that the way South Korea developed so rapidly is through a free market and a great liberal society. And no.
Remember in World War II when the U.S. occupied Australia due to a threat of Japanese invasion, and the U.S. established segregationist laws and forceful policing? It loved us so much, they requested that we leave 3 times. And when Australia elected the minorly socially democratic government in the 70s, America cooed them. America cooed Australia. And we're like, no, that's okay. It's okay to do that. It's just among friends. It's just a little cooing among friends, okay? It's not a big deal. Just like what would happen to Canada, by the way, if Canada ever did meaningfully push back against U.S. hegemony in any way. the whole like we're two separate nations thing would really disappear really quickly. Oh no, of course Canada has sovereignty to do what they to make democratic decisions. We would find out the reality of that relationship really quickly if we ever actually challenged it. Yeah, it's being a democracy, except when it counts. You're not allowed to decide that, though, democratically. Pretty amazing.
No, actually, South Korea was a military dictatorship until very recently, until just a few decades ago. And it was a very brutal military dictatorship that did not allow labor unions to operate, that brutally repressed labor. And it developed through massive state intervention.
You do what you like as long as we like what you do.
Oligarchic system.
That's a
In
good
fact,
way of looking at it.
Nearly 2/3, over 60% of Korea's entire economy, its GDP, it comes from 10 what are known as chaebols, which are family-run corporate monopolies. And, you know, there's
in Canada
certain
as well.
big companies like Samsung and GM.
We still live in feudalism.
LG.
We live in feudalism with just like a few little extra steps, and we've changed around the names of a few things. Really? Like, it's the same bullshit with the families and the houses, the great houses and the little princelings and princesses running around, running everything. It's just been obscured a little tiny bit. That's really all it is, isn't it? And there's this illusion that we have some kind of democratic control. We have democratic control, again, as long as we don't meaningfully challenge the power of the great houses. You know? That's really all it is. Sure, you can make your little democratic conditions as long as you don't meaningfully challenge the power of the great houses and the kings and the lords and the princes and princelings and princesses that rule you. You see? And then you can make some little decisions about, you know, whether the top tax rate is 37% or 33%. You can choose between those two things. That's different. They worked harder than us to become an oligarchs. Yeah. Completely different from the Russian oligarchs, of course. Of course, who were created by the same type of intervention. That's the funny thing, the whole like Russian oligarchs thing, who exist because of the collapse of the Soviet Union. We created Russian oligarchs, and on top of that, we ourselves have oligarchs as well. But we don't refer to them as such. We refer to them as just like our betters. The 1%. It's really amazing though, isn't it? God, I'm really taking a long time to get through this video. This whole thing. 20 minutes into this thing, I've done so much commentary. At least people don't think that I'm just relying on breakthrough news to fill the spaces. It's been a good jumping off point to a lot of good discussion. On my oligarch type grind. Yeah, and maybe in some very rare cases, certain people are able to go from being serfs to being an oligarch themselves. In a few cases, which are extremely managed by the ruling class to ensure that that's still not upsetting the social order too much. It's the Elon Musks of the world that are allowed to become oligarchs. I've been to class and back, and you're only 20 minutes in. We've been doing a lot of yapping. I'm doing a lot of yapping. I don't know what you're talking about. My friend is dating a mediocre Russian DJ who somehow can afford to tour the world, and he said communism bad. Well, you know, we got to hear both sides. We got to hear both sides, and then we can, you know, come to some agreement that the real answer is somewhere in the middle. Yeah, the meritocracy. God. The audacity that we have to pretend that that's a real thing. The meritocracy. It's all the people that run our society. They're all from the same families that have been doing it for generations. I mean, you go to the UK, it's even worse, right? It goes back centuries. All the same families that have been doing it for generations. They all go to the same schools. They all go to the same country clubs. They all go to the same churches. They're all part of the same, like, weird secret societies and the Ivy League schools where they're, like, masturbating over skeletons or whatever else they're doing. It's all the same people and their kids and then their kids and their kids. It's been going on for years and years. All the exact same people sitting on all the boards. They'll honk off in the same coffins. It's so stupid. But with the meritocracy, fuck off with that. Just unbelievable that people believe that. I got in this place because I have merit, you see. So stupid. The fail sonocracy. And there's diminishing returns on all these people in terms of their actual like ability to be the ruling class. Jealousy rears its head. Yeah, that's it. That is it. Serfs just became free wage laborers, and it may have actually been worse for them. Well, and ironically, there was a time when you could actually make a claim to having like a middle class because of the Russian Revolution and the Soviet Union and the USSR. Repeat myself, but like because of that, it scares American capitalists enough that they give a few crumbs to the former serfs, now workers, and create this middle class when there's this high tax rate. And, you know, they're for certain people in the serfdom, not everybody, of course, because it's still deeply racist and misogynist and patriarchal. But you could conceivably make the claim that at that point, the economic system was like offering a path to like this middle class where people could get a good education, people could get a good union job at a factory or whatever. People could get a house, afford to have a house, have 2-3 kids, go on vacation a couple times a year. That was like an achievable thing for people at one point when there was this kind of inclination towards a sort of social democracy, and this high tax rate and the ability of raising these big revenues to invest in infrastructure and different programs and stuff, which of course had to be slowly chipped away at because the ruling class were so disgusted and offended by this idea that they had to share even a little tiny bit, that they spent like, you know, the next several decades ensuring they could chip away at that every little bit until it was eventually just completely gone. And now we're living in the result of that kind of final victory there. Yeah, the peasants had land. I don't have any fucking land. Anyway, that's the ultimate irony of that, is that for as much as we talk about a meritocracy, if that was at one point a feature of our economic system, it's no longer, that has been removed. The ability for people to be upwardly mobile has been completely like demolished. Anyway, maybe we can finish this video after 21 minutes in. I got to go in an hour as well. I got to go in 1 hour. I'll just remind people again, if you enjoy the show and the content, please subscribe. I'm at 3 subs. I realize it's kind of a slow day today. I hope, though, if you enjoy this show and you enjoy this program and you want to support the commentary that I do and you want to support the community, that people please subscribe. I really appreciate it. I don't want to do a big thing. I don't want to make this a big thing. If people can subscribe, though, obviously, would appreciate it a lot. Thank you. Let's continue this video.
Samsung and LG, that are these massive Korean corporate giants that everyone around the world recognizes, and they represent such a massive part of the Korean economy that they have significant political power. And again, these chaebols are actually run by families. They're like family dynasties. So it shows that Korea is not really, South Korea, even today with the facade of being a liberal democracy, it really is just a complete oligarchy in which a small handful of capitalist oligarchs have significant political influence, and they work hand in glove with the United States. And another way that South Korea was able to develop is essentially this parasitic relationship where, I mean, the United States is the parasite, of course, but the U.S. the U.S. essentially uses South Korea as this bastion. Michael Hudson has shown this in his book Super Imperialism, how, you know, South Korea, through exploiting labor brutally in South Korea and through a massive manufacturing sector, it creates this massive, through all these exports, it creates this massive inflow of foreign exchange with this massive current account trade surplus. And where does all that money go? It flows back into the U.S. financial system because the South Korean government, which is completely dependent on the United States and occupied by the United States, it invests all of that money in U.S. government securities and treasury securities, and therefore finances the very...
Thank you, GMO Radio, for the gifted sub to Nicolas Maduro, official 69. Thanks, GMO Radio.
Same military occupation of the country. So again, it's this kind of circular relationship where South Korea plays an integral role in U.S. military strategy, trying to, basically surround China, and has done so since the 1950s with, tens of thousands of U.S. troops, 26,000 troops who are still there. And I mean, that number has fluctuated over the years. And economically, it also plays an important role in the global capitalist system, centered in Wall Street. And it's not the South Korean people who benefit from that. So if South Korea were able to be more sovereign, to kick out the military occupiers, to integrate economically with other countries in Asia, with its massive manufacturing capabilities, with its massive economic potential, I mean, and were to reunify with the North, I mean, this would be a major global power. And obviously, I think there would be a lot of room for improving the living standards of Korean workers as well, who, I should stress again, South Korea is notorious for being a country where workers are brutally exploited, and we can see this reflected in popular culture and things like Squid Game and movies like Parasite from these Korean filmmakers. And they show, that they provide this kind of cinematic look at the crises of debt and depression and suicide, rampant suicide in South Korea, because so many people, they just feel economically that they have no way out.
Yeah, very, very important. I want to turn now to the trip to China by Nicolas Maduro, head of state of Venezuela. Here's what Xi Jinping's statement about Maduro's trip. I'm not going to read the very first words of it, but he basically says, look, this is your 5th trip here. He says, Venezuela and China are worthy friends. I want the audience to actually hear these words, Ben, and then let you do the diplomatic interpretation, because diplomatic language is its own thing. And so if people aren't used to diplomatic language, they might not know what it is. Venezuela and China are worthy friends, says Xi Jinping, and partners in mutual development. China has always viewed its relationship with Venezuela from a strategic and long-term perspective. We will continue to firmly support Venezuela's efforts to uphold its national sovereignty, national dignity, and social stability. Here's the next line. We resolutely support Venezuela's just cause against external interference. I am delighted to jointly announce with you the elevation of China-Venezuela relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Now, this is the comprehensive all-weather strategic partnership. China has that currently with Pakistan. Now it has it with Pakistan and with Venezuela. And you have other sort of strategic partnerships in the lexicon or vernacular of Chinese diplomacy. One is the Mutual Defense Treaty. That's with DPRK. I think that's the only mutual defense treaty. And then, of course, there's the New Era Comprehensive Strategic Partnership that China has forged in the recent period with Russia. So when you think about Venezuela, Ben, and you were in Latin America for a long time, and you and I have talked about Venezuela. I was deeply involved in the Venezuela Embassy Protection Collective when the U.S. basically seized the Venezuelan embassy. We were in the embassy for many, many weeks, saying this is a violation of the Vienna Convention. The U.S. doesn't have the right to seize other governments' diplomatic compounds, that these compounds are inviolable. But that was happening at the same time that the U.S. says, well, Maduro's no longer president of Venezuela. Juan Guaido is the new president, even though he never ran for president. The U.S. just said, well, he's the president.
I can't believe they tried that.
Britain seized the assets of Venezuela. I mean, they stole, they just took like more than $1 billion of Venezuelan.
We don't talk about that enough. I mean, I know Guaido's become kind of a joke, but it is so preposterous to think about now. We really tried that, and with Canada, and Canada was implicated in it as well. It was the funny thing about Trump, because Trump was elected and we had to pretend that he was this big like bad guy, when really just like he really was contributing to this plan that we were totally on board with, Canada and the Lima Group and all this stuff. And we really tried to just be like, no, this guy's the president now. This guy, we're just all going to collectively agree to just call this guy the president, despite no one voting for him and having no real constituency to speak of. We just do a bunch of like Ned-backed protest movements, like we saw, and we're just going to claim that people are so unhappy that they like this new guy now. Trump really ruined that by getting in there, because Hillary would have gone along with that exact same plan. Trump really ruined that for them by being such a dumbass and appointing like Elliot Abrams and really stripping away all like the woke veneer from the whole like imperialist enterprise in Venezuela. All the shit about human rights that we were saying to try and talk about why we were installing this totally random dude as the president was just stripped away by Trump, because he's not able to have that kind of like nuance. And he's putting in Elliot Abrams and all these like old Cold war criminals. It kind of, our whole veneer of like, or facade of caring about human rights and whatever else we were pretending to care about was just totally stripped away.
Gold. They just seized it like old style colonial seizures. It looked like Venezuela was really maybe on its last legs. And yet Venezuela persevered for a lot of different reasons. One is the government does have a considerable base of support.
Venezuela.
The Bolivarian Revolution has
Bolivia,
roots. Also, the opposition was divided.
Nicaragua.
But it looked like Venezuela was pretty isolated because all of the imperialists
Cuba
joined with the United States in this effort to crush Venezuela. Now you have, in 2023, just 4 years later,
like we used to,
Maduro in China, and China says, look, we resolutely support your efforts to avoid foreign interference, and we are now entering into a strategic partnership. I mean, what does this mean for Venezuela, and what might it mean for Latin America, which doesn't want to be America's backyard, doesn't want to be the victim of American sanctions? Just let's talk about this as a potential, at least.
Yeah, this is very important. I would say historic. And first, I'll say, before I look at the official statement from President Xi, that in the past 20 years, Latin American-China relations have completely shifted. Really, at the beginning of the 2000s, China did not have close diplomatic relations with many countries in Latin America, and trade was very minimal. In fact, of all of the regions of the world that still maintain diplomatic relations with separatists on Taiwan, most of those countries were in Latin America. And in the past 2 decades, we've seen gradually more and more countries in the region recognize the People's Republic of China, break off diplomatic relations with Taipei. And especially in the past few years in Central America, we saw first Costa Rica, and then El Salvador, and then Nicaragua, and now just recently Honduras, which has a new left-wing government. And there's talk of Guatemala being the next one. So the United States has pressured a lot of these countries in Latin America to maintain diplomatic relations with separatists on Taiwan. And even though the United States formally recognizes that Taiwan is being part of the People's Republic of China, and in 1972, when Richard Nixon visited China and the United States signed the beginning of the 3 communiques, the diplomatic agreements that formalized U.S.-Chinese ties, the U.S. recognized formally that Taiwan is a province of the People's Republic of China. So the U.S. has always maintained this policy of strategic ambiguity and has used Latin America and the Caribbean, pressuring these countries to recognize Taiwan separatists. And still today, There are only 13 countries on Earth that have a collective population of 0.5% of the global population. They're very small countries that recognize the separatists on Taiwan as a separate government, and over half of them are in Latin America and the Caribbean still. I mentioned Guatemala, also several Caribbean nations, including Haiti, a country that the U.S. is trying to militarily occupy using other countries as front. But anyway, so the reason I mentioned that is because what we saw is a less known element of the so-called pink tide, the wave of progressive governments in Latin America in the 2000s, is not only were many of these governments implementing socialistic policies, redistributive policies, nationalizing natural resources, expanding public health spending and education, but many of them were also economically integrating with China. And this is a part that's not as well known. So Hugo Chavez, for instance, the Venezuelan revolutionary leader who initiated the Bolivarian Revolution, he was one of the first leaders in Latin America who really closely allied with the People's Republic of China. Another figure who's even less known is Ecuador's president, Rafael Correa. In Ecuador, he also formed a very close partnership with China. And what we saw in the past 2 decades is Chinese-Latin American
Spanish
trade has
enunciation.
exploded. And now there are multiple countries in Latin America who actually trade more with China than they trade with the United States, including the largest economy in the region, which is Brazil. Brazil's largest trade partner by far is China, and increasingly so. Brazil's President Lula
that global economic integration seems to have paid dividends for their diplomatic
as an example of how important this partnership is.
Who's responsible
for that? When Lula
that?
visited the United States, he visited for 1 day, less than 1 day, and he signed no agreements. When Lula visited China, he visited for 4 days, and he signed more than a dozen agreements, nearly 20, including multiple trade deals, integration of agriculture, technology transfer, many different things. China and Brazil also recently announced that they're going to be trading without the dollar, that Brazil will buy Chinese goods using Chinese yuan, and China will buy Brazilian goods using Brazilian real. So this region has become more and more closely integrated with China, which again is the world's, the center of the global economy, the world's factory. China is responsible for nearly 1/3 of global manufacturing. So whereas the U.S. economy and the neoliberal era has been financialized and consumed by, financial capital on Wall Street, which is not productive. By definition, it's parasitic. The U.S. has deindustrialized. A lot of those good manufacturing jobs were outsourced, leaving the Rust Belt, a region that's been economically depressed with a lot of unemployment. China, on the other hand, is still a manufacturing power and is working closely with Latin America. So I mentioned all of that to provide context for for Venezuela's specific relationship. I mentioned that Hugo Chavez was really a pioneer in boosting Latin American relations with China. And of course, Venezuela's economy for over 100 years has been really a petrostate. I mean, this is a problem that goes back before Hugo Chavez was even born. The Venezuelan economy is very heavily reliant on oil exports. And
Brian, I don't think they could join. I mean, I think DPRK and Venezuela being in BRICS would be cool, but I don't think they can just join. I think, didn't they just let in the last crop of countries? So wouldn't it be till the next conference that they have more? I think they would be both good candidates to be part of it, though.
And China is the world's largest importer of oil. So there's a natural partnership there. I mentioned that China and Iran recently signed an agreement, a 25-year agreement. There's speculation that China and Venezuela may, in the near future, announce a similar agreement. So it's a strategic partnership that makes perfect sense. Now, when you throw in everything that you mentioned, Brian, in terms of the U.S. sanctions, the goal of the U.S. sanctions was, of course, to overthrow the Venezuelan government, fundamentally, regime change. But also, the goal of the United States was simply to prevent Venezuela's economy from functioning by preventing the government from being able to produce and export oil. And specifically, if you look at the sanctions that go back to Obama, they started under Obama. In 2015, the Obama White House absurdly claimed that Venezuela was an extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. That was a way for Obama to impose sanctions without getting congressional approval, although Congress probably would have approved it anyway. So the U.S. began imposing these executive orders, and they drastically expanded under Trump. And most of these sanctions, until they became a full-on economic embargo, like the Cuba-style embargo, most of the sanctions were targeted at the Venezuelan oil sector. The U.S. was trying to collapse the Venezuelan economy by trying to prevent Venezuela from being able to export its oil, and also trying to simply destroy the Venezuelan oil sector because the Venezuelan oil sector for 100 years has been dominant in the economy before even Hugo Chavez ever came to power. What that meant is that
this is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Hello, Majority Report. What's up? Thank you for the raid, Majority Report. Woo! Woo! Yeah! Thank you, Majority Report. I don't know what that was. I don't know what that noise was. Ignore that. Anyway, thanks for joining the stream, folks. I'm Rob. Hello, it's nice to see you. How's it going? How are you doing? How is the Majority Report stream today? What did you cover on the Majority Report stream? Was Sam Sater as much of a fucking nightmare as usual? Today, very scary man, that Sam Sater. Very scary man. Very intimidating. Anyway, thanks for joining the show. Hey, if you can, please hit the follow button. Please smash the follow button if you can. That's one thing that you could do right now at this very moment that would help me out a lot. That costs you nothing at all. You just need to click the little button. That's all. Crowder is still shaking and crying and throwing up to this day. That's right. That's absolutely right. Anyway, I hope the Majority Report stream is good. We were just talking about the Majority Report was blasted by COVID. So we had Emma at the first half, then Matt in the second. Oh, wow. Matt Binder? I'm sorry to hear that. That's not cool. Hope Sam makes a speedy recovery from that. Yeah, anyway, we're just talking about some of the different geopolitical news stories that are going on right now. We're watching this clip between Brian Becker and Ben Norton talking about the burgeoning sort of alliance between DPRK and Russia. Now they're going over the China and Venezuelan cooperation in their meeting that they've been doing over the last couple of days. It's one of the things we talk about often, the general trends that we've been talking about on this show, this kind of shifting geopolitical landscape. So just really a couple of big stories going on in that world right now. That's what we're focusing on today. But thanks for joining again. I appreciate it. I'm Rob, and it's nice to see you. And thank you again. I hope you stick around.
From the U.S. oil industry. And of course, you had U.S. oil corporations like Exxon who were very active in exploiting Venezuela's oil resources. So what that meant is that when Hugo Chavez came to power, when he nationalized the oil, when he kicked out the foreign corporations, he was still using oil technology from U.S. companies and European companies. Venezuela did not produce its own oil technology, oil drilling technology and refinery technology. This is, very advanced technology. So what we've seen in the past few years, interestingly, is that Iran has actually provided a lot of this technology to Venezuela because Iran is another major oil manufacturer and Iran has been under sanctions since the revolution in 1979. So the sanctions have been very painful in Venezuela, but they have meant
not even
that
dignifying
Venezuela
that with a
has
response,
become
Marty.
more and more sovereign. It's been slowly recuperating its oil sector, increasing oil production. And now with this new strategic partnership, I think very clearly China is saying that China and Venezuela are going to deepen their relations. They're probably going to have some agreement similar to the agreement that China signed with Iran. And it's also for China a way to maintain energy security. Because if you think of it from China's perspective, this is a country that is very heavily reliant on the import of fossil fuels. It is at breakneck speed moving toward a green energy. In fact, China this year is on the path to install more solar panels than the United States has ever installed in its history.
You can count on
last
me.
year,
You're gonna have
China
good
did the
old
exact same
Rob
thing.
to talk
So
you
I mean,
through all
China
this.
is leading the
It's
world
going
in
to
the
go up
green
next year as
transition,
well.
while the U.S.
It's going to be even more. Thank you, Diego, for the gifted sub. Very much appreciated, Diego. Thank you.
talks about it, China is actually putting its money where its mouth is. But still, this is a national security issue for China. So by forming close relationships, not only is it politically, not only does it make perfect sense, as socialist governments, for China and Venezuela to form this relationship, but it also shows that China is thinking in the long term that China and Venezuela are going to mutually support each other. And Venezuela needs a market for its oil because the U.S. has been trying to destroy its economy. And China needs a reliable energy partner who's not going to go along with the United States and try to cut off its oil supply. So, I mean, I think looking in the near future, clearly, when you look at some of the agreements that were signed thus far, so for instance, when Maduro originally arrived in China, he did not go to Beijing, which is the political capital. He went to Shenzhen, which is a technological hub. And a lot of the discussion, if you listen to Maduro's speeches, he's talking about Venezuela wants technology transfer. And this is a big talking point that a lot of countries in the global south that are working with China, they want China to help them develop technologically. China has moved up the chain of technological development from very low value added production of, things like basic electronics and toys. And now China is developing some of the most high-tech goods in the world, including, Huawei technology. So now that China has moved up in the technological production, many countries like Venezuela are also trying to develop their own industry. So I think this is something that is going to be very important in the years to come. And again, China is thinking strategically, not just in 5 years, but decades down the road.
So important as a perspective, Ben. Thank you for that.
That's working for
me. It was
me.
interesting. Maduro held up a cell phone. It was a Huawei cell phone. He says, I have a Chinese phone and the U.S. can't surveil me with it. So that's how he started. Go ahead.
Quick note just on that. That was really funny. He said, yeah, I have a great Huawei phone. The U.S. can't spy on me. But speaking of phones in Venezuela under Chavez experimented a lot with industrialization because Chavez recognized the importance of diversifying the economy because it's so heavily reliant on the oil sector. And under Chavez, the Venezuelan government did try to develop cell phones, actually. But unfortunately, it was a very difficult process. I mean, it's very important to talk about the victories and the gains of the Venezuelan government. But we also have to understand that Venezuela, just because a socialist comes to power doesn't mean that he can fundamentally transform the economy that he inherited that was created over 100 years. And Venezuela does not have a lot of technological capabilities. So
you can't just press the diversify the economy button, as much as some people think that's how you get factories in your country. That's how you develop alternative industries like that. Why don't you simply just press the build factories button on SimCity? That's not actually how it works. That's not how it works. You actually need investment. You need capital in order to make these kinds of big investments. Simply press the factory button. Press the diversify the economy button.
I think really what the failed experiment in
or
trying
lady,
to
I
develop
did last year and I
in
didn't. I felt weird about
Chavez, I think is something that a lot of people in Venezuela
It's
are
not
thinking
happening.
about
I got
today.
enough sub goals.
And China is a natural partner. If they're going to try to develop industry in the future, obviously the U.S. is never going to allow them to do that. The U.S. wants countries in Latin America and the global South in general to simply export raw materials. It doesn't want them to industrialize and develop their own
resource
diversified
colonies.
Economies. And China is clearly thinking in the long term of how it can work with countries in Latin America and Africa.
Shut the fuck up. Do what we tell you and just give resources to us. Give your resources to us.
That is not
That's
reliant
all.
on the United States.
In a moment, Ben, I want to talk to you about U.S. military strategy towards China because
just click the industrial zoning
the
button
U.S.
and
is
drag
getting
it
ready
over some
for a
area.
war
Exactly.
with China
It's easy.
in the Pacific.
That's the whole argument about China, right? In the late 70s, Why don't they just build some factories? Just build some factories. But it's like, no, that's not, you can't just do that though. That's exactly why they made this calculation that if they opened up their economy to foreign investment, they could industrialize. That was the only way that they could industrialize like that. And now they've created this decades-long, experienced, motivated, educated workforce. And this historically huge industrial sector. It would have been nice to probably do that by just pressing the socialism button or pressing the build factories button, but it's not quite as simple as that in reality.
I think the thinking, the military thinking of the United States is if they can limit the confrontation to the Pacific, they can kind of contain China, disrupt trade with China, make China's ability to import energy more difficult, and that China won't dare escalate the war beyond a regional war because the U.S. has nuclear primacy. So it's kind of a playing chicken with nuclear war kind of strategy and putting enormous pressure on China. I want to talk to you about that in a minute, but first, I want to go back to a couple other things that you said that I think are really important. Here you had Obama declaring ridiculously that there was an extraordinary national security threat from Venezuela in 2015, again, using national security as a pretext to do something else. Venezuela wasn't threatening the United States. They wanted to impose sanctions. They could do it through the executive branch unilaterally, avoid Congress, just do it, with the idea of subverting Venezuela's ability to become economically independent. That's the point that you made. And again, national security is a pretext. In the case of China, the U.S. is sort of asserting that every economic step forward that China makes is a national security threat. So under the pretext of national security, the U.S. is trying to stop China's economic advance by depriving China of being able to purchase advanced chips and other high technologies the U.S. has in Western.
I say Matrix Militia. You say I saw a video where a Chinese professor talked about how China's success is based on progressing through the stages of industrialization from an agricultural base to light industry to fund the development of the infrastructure necessary for competitive heavy industry. And I think one thing that's fascinating, and I think it's an inarguable truth, that this process has only ever been able to be condensed into such a short span of time under socialist societies with centrally planned economies in the USSR and in China. Like, they were able to industrialize so rapidly, whereas the whole industrialization process, like in the Industrial Revolution, took a long time, took generations. And the Soviet Union was able to rapidly industrialize over just a few decades, and now we're seeing the same thing happen in China. And even though, they've incorporated elements of market economies and capitalism, things like that, it's only under this socialist system being administered by a communist party that they've ever been able to engage in this process of rapid industrial development on such a short time frame, which is something that is a really, really long and complex process. Yeah, planning your economy for the long term. It's really amazing to think about. It's so foreign. It's completely foreign to our the way we do things here. You planning your economy for the long term, and not just figuring it out as you go along and living your life on a quarter by quarter profit statement basis, and actually having a long-term vision and a centrally planned economy. It's just impossible to wrap our minds around. Kevin Feige, but for your infrastructure. Yeah, private corporations do central planning. It's just we can't do it from the state. The state can't do it. It's incapable of it. And the Industrial Revolution was funded partly by wealth extracted from the East. Good point. And like I was saying as well, like the whole New Deal and the whole mid-century post-war economy where there was this middle class, that was also heavily reliant on wealth extracted from imperialism as well, which is really worth pointing out whenever we talk about that. To say nothing of the ways that, racial minorities and women and other marginalized groups were completely excluded from those gains that some working people were getting during that period. Yeah, well, you see that thing PM Trio with the whole that's part of the sort of scam of the Black Book of Communism, where it's like that's just in rapidly changing your society so much. It's just like inherently a violent process. It's a necessary process and was completely necessary in both of those cases that I mentioned. But yeah, in the Industrial Revolution, that killed millions as well, technically, but it took place over this really extended period of time. When you condense that into 20, 30 years, you see that shift happening and the consequences that it has. It's more apparent.
Countries have patent rights,
Almost
intellectual property
video.
rights over some of the design. So again, national security as a pretext. And then there's the other issue of how the U.S. actually functions, which is a security threat to all the other countries in the world, and arrogates to itself this kind of idea that it can be the modern day pirate. Here's a headline: U.S. seizes nearly 1 million barrels of Iranian oil.
It's criminal enterprise.
China. The U.S. just seizes it.
You can't do that
on the high seas. And what was the reason? What gave the United States the right to steal Iran's oil, seize it like the modern day imperial pirates that they are? It's because the U.S. claimed that Iran was violating international sanctions, but the international sanctions were imposed unilaterally by the United States.
You're not allowed to have bilateral relationships with one another. We said no.
And the United States and other countries from the Security Council and Germany signed the nuclear deal with Iran back during the Obama administration. They were supposed to lift sanctions. Trump tore up that agreement, said it was the worst agreement ever.
Don't make deals with the United States.
And Biden, who's a Democrat,
isn't there someone you forgot to ask?
Gone back to the agreement. And instead, under Biden, you have the United States seizing 1 million barrels of Iranian oil bound for China. If other countries did this, seizing huge, vast quantities of oil destined to come to the United States, purchased by U.S. Companies, the U.S. would say, well, that's an act of war.
It's truly amazing.
That's absolutely right. I mean,
and again, it's the colonial mentality. That's how you miss that.
Is so absurd. People should think about this for a second. The sanctions that Washington imposes on most countries, pretty much all, are illegal according to international law. They're officially known as unilateral coercive measures. According to international law, if you want to impose sanctions on a country, you have to do so with the approval of the United Nations Security Council. So if you don't have UN approval, they're unilateral, they're illegal. The United States unilaterally, that is illegally, imposes sanctions on countries like Iran or China or Venezuela. And then the United States says that if that country trades with another country, not with the United States, but with another country, that country is violating the sanctions that it imposed, as if that should matter.
Communist hero
as
Trump
if
did what?
Those sanctions are abiding by international law. They're not. The United States doesn't create international law. That's why Washington is actually trying to replace international law with the so-called rules-based international order, in which the United States makes the rules and orders everyone around. But that's not how actual international law works. So this is an example here of sheer piracy. This is not the first time. The United States repeatedly has stolen oil from Iranian tankers.
And worth pointing out as well that these Iranian sanctions, which as Ben and Brian are both pointing out, the Iranians negotiated in good faith to get out from under those sanctions. They signed a deal, the Iran deal. This is one of the actually significantly good achievements of the Obama administration from a foreign policy standpoint, who otherwise had a brutal and blood-drenched imperialist foreign policy. One of their only big accomplishments was that Iran deal. When Iran negotiated in good faith, they were abiding by the deal. The United States just said no. We said no. We changed our minds. Which is, again, that's not how that works. When you make a deal and you both make an agreement and you sign it, you can't just be like, no, we decided we're not going to do it anymore. That's how the whole Meng Wanzhou 2 Michaels thing started. So it's their unilateral sanctions. The United States broke the deal and then says, no, we're reimposing these totally unilateral sanctions. By the way, most Democrats voted for those sanctions on Iran, by the way, going against their own heroes' own foreign policy achievement because Russia bad, because they were tied. I keep going down this rabbit hole here, but they announced those sanctions against Iran and tied them to Russian sanctions. And liberals were like, well, let's see Mr. President Putin's boyfriend sign these Russian sanctions. Obviously he won't. So American liberals and Democrats sabotaged their own hero president's most significant foreign policy achievement to own Trump. And Trump was just like, Trump just signed them. Trump just signed the sanctions because it turns out he wasn't this Russian Manchurian candidate. So they sacrificed their own president's major foreign policy accomplishment. They just unilaterally decide to start sanctioning Iran again, despite them abiding by that deal that they agreed to and they negotiated and they signed. And then Meng Wanzhou, because the United States accuses them of violating these arbitrary unilateral sanctions, America says, Canada, arrest this woman. And we say, well, okay, boss, sure thing. Is there anything else we can help you with? And we arrest this powerful Chinese national. And then China's just like, what the fuck are you doing? And they snatch up 2 of our guys, our precious boys, the beautiful Michaels. They're like, what the fuck are you doing imprisoning this important person? They snatch up 2 of our guys, and what do? Oh, look what they're doing. They're so conniving, just arbitrarily kidnapping our beautiful boys like that for no reason. It's like, no, there was a reason. And it all goes back to those sanctions on Iran, which were illegal in the first place. It's just preposterous. You look at every single one of these situations and we are very obviously the aggressors, or America's the aggressor and Canada's going along with their bullshit because we're doing what we're told. And then each and every time we're pointing the finger at Iran, Venezuela, China, DPRK, Russia, and being like, look at how violent they are. Look at how provocative they are. Can you believe these people? I just get so tired of this strategy. It's like cry bullying. That's ultimately, you see that in on the online posting world. America is the cry bully of nations. Bullying everybody, arbitrarily waging economic warfare all around the world, and then acting shocked and appalled when anyone remotely pushes back on it. And of course, then using that for further hostility and further aggression. It's very frustrating. I gotta go soon. I gotta finish this video.
Sent to third parties. Furthermore, you mentioned that the United States has stolen the foreign exchange reserves of the Iranian central bank,
the
of the Venezuelan central bank, of the Afghan central bank, which is fueling a mass hyperinflation crisis and could lead to a famine in Afghanistan. And of course, the United States recently and Europe stole $300 billion in euros of assets, part of the Russian central bank. That is money that belongs to the Russian people, and the West simply stole it. And that's a significant reason, by the way,
it's like the
why many
cops
countries in the global South around the world are seeking alternatives now to the U.S. dollar, including longtime U.S. allies like Saudi Arabia and Egypt. They're actually seeking alternatives because they recognize that if they do something that upsets Washington, the United States may simply try to steal
the global criminal cartel
they hold in dollars or euro-denominated assets. So
that's what our empire is. It's a global criminal cartel.
Which is accurate, is I think even in some ways just downplaying. I mean, no pirate, Blackbeard or whoever, could ever imagine being this much of a massive international criminal. I mean, no criminal in human history has been able to exercise this kind of extraterritorial criminality. It reminds me, Smedley Butler, who was a U.S. Marine general, the highest decorated military officer of his day. He famously he became a socialist and an anti-imperialist. He wrote a pamphlet about how war is a racket. And he said famously in War is a Racket that, people talk about gangsters, who operated in a few neighborhoods. Well, he said, I was a racketeer for capital. I was the biggest gangster ever seen. I operated on 3 continents. Al Capone operated in 3 states. I operated in 3 continents. Well, here we're talking about more than 3 continents. We're saying the U.S. is the racketeer, the gangster, the pirate that says that its law supposedly applies to every inch of the planet. And by the way, we're speaking of Iran trying to sell oil to China and being seized by the United States. And this is, again, by the way, if you're in Beijing, you can bet that a lot of policymakers are now thinking once again about the national security issue of energy imports. But furthermore, speaking of the U.S. trying to apply its sanctions extraterritorially, we saw another example of this recently. So the United States imposed these illegal sanctions on Chinese firms trying to prevent China from importing numerous forms of technology, including advanced semiconductors, quantum computing parts, and AI technology. And specifically, the United States has sanctioned many different Chinese companies, but two technology companies involved in semiconductors and phone production, which is Huawei and SMIC, which is Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation. SMIC is a state-owned company in China, and Huawei was founded by a PLA military officer, which is closely linked to the government. So recently, Huawei announced that it has created this very advanced phone, which is called the Mate 60 Pro, which includes very advanced Kirin 9000 chips, which include 7-nanometer semiconductors. Now, the United States was trying to prevent China from getting access to 12-nanometer semiconductors. Well, now it has 7-nanometer semiconductors. Just in the span of a few years, China's been able to overcome these U.S. sanctions, which again are illegal. And in response to this, the United States has formally accused China of violating sanctions. The U.S. doesn't say what the sanctions are, but the U.S. and international trade organizations is formally accusing
China of violating sanctions. It's really surprising that people around the world are getting tired of this arrangement.
China's state-owned semiconductor company gave the Chinese
company, it's just a mystery of why people around the world are just rejecting this situation.
So
this,
once again, I mean, this is absolutely insane. The United States is accusing China on the international stage of violating sanctions, not mentioning that those sanctions are illegal, unilateral U.S. sanctions. And the U.S. is accusing China of violating sanctions because a Chinese company traded with a Chinese company. So quite literally, Washington is trying to say to the entire world, you cannot trade without our approval. If you trade in your own borders with 2 firms inside your own country and we don't like it, we're going to accuse you of violating international trade policies. This is an international dictatorship. No country on earth is allowed to trade without Washington's approval. That's what the U.S. truly believes.
Truly amazing.
Amazing. You mentioned Smedley Butler.
I gotta. Oh, fuck. This should be
and how he kind of defected from
the whole thing with Smedley Butler. Is he was one of the central people that was part of that business plot. They were trying to pull him in to overthrow the government, overthrow FDR's government. And when that didn't work, they just erased the whole New Deal over the decades, like I was saying, chipped away at it and through their own kind of machinations after the coup itself didn't work.
The racket, the gangsterism, and exposed it. There's the new head of the Marines is General Eric Smith. And General Smith said that the U.S. and the U.S. Marines in particular have to get ready for war with China. That was in the last couple of days. He said deterring China is a key focus and that the Marines will strive to make sure a conflict in the Indo-Pacific does not spill over to Japan. So on the pretext of defending Japan, the U.S. Marines are now getting ready for war against China. The head of the U.S. Air Force Command overseas, his name is General Michael Minihan. He said a few months ago, quote, "My gut tells me we will fight in 2025," meaning with China. "I hope I am wrong, but my gut tells me we will fight in 2025. Aim for the head," meaning let's make sure we kill them. That's the head of the Air Force Overseas Command. Now you have the U.S. Marine, the top U.S. Marine saying the threat is real with China. I mean, when you think about the Marines, the Marine anthem from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Well, the United States actually invaded Tripoli, Libya, in 1805. So it's got this long track record of overseas intervention. The Marines
are still a failed state after the latest overthrow of Libyan government.
It's not about the defense of the country. Fighting the country's battles in the land, air, and sea, as the Marine anthem goes. I looked through, and we did a show last week, Ben, about the U.S. media, And the U.S. media is like this kind of headline. And we have 10 of them. I have 10 of them in front of me. U.S. military is unprepared.
Well, like what you're saying too, Diego, with the New Deal. See so many right-wingers being confused about the New Deal with votes. Didn't affect anything and did nothing to get the USA out of the Great Depression, and also was also very bad and evil and ruined the country forever. But also was the time of America where American capitalism was prospering that we need to go back to before all this wokeness ruined everything. It's simultaneously ineffective, was actively bad, and was also responsible for the whole era of American capitalism that we love to fetishize, the white picket house fence and the suburbs and all that stuff. That's all the return people. We must return, who all would have been unilaterally opposed to all the economic policies that led to that prosperity in the first place. These people have very little understanding of any of these historical trends. They're very confused people. You're right.
For war with China, General warns. U.S. is not ready to quickly produce and ship weapon systems. Defense industry unprepared for war with China. That's the Hill. I mean, if you go through all of these headlines, you can see that the American media is the main story is we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet for the war. There's not like stories like, wait, this is preposterous.
We shouldn't have a war. Yeah.
Absurd. This is terrible. We shouldn't have a war with China. We should try to not have a war with China.
We should try to be friends
with China. The U.S. couldn't defeat the Taliban in Afghanistan. So now the main complaint from the U.S. media, mainstream media, is the U.S. isn't ready to fight China, where 1 out of every 5 human beings lives in China. The absurdity of it is unbelievable. But the entire propaganda effort of the United States is unbelievable. I mean, it's so, if anyone has like sort of an objective ability or an objective faculty, when you listen to what you said, Ben, about the U.S. sanctioning Chinese companies for doing business with China, or the U.S. saying that it has the right to seize oil from Iranian tankers that are going to China because Iran and China have made a trade deal. When you see all the U.S. headlines about the American government's not yet ready for war, let's get ready for war, and you see that this is the Republicans and the Democrats, that there really is a consensus about all of these issues. There's a freedom of press, like right now, Breakthrough News in the socialist program, we can interview you and we're not going to be raided by the police. Well, we don't think not today yet. Or tomorrow, and have the studio seized because we still have free press. But the mainstream media that has billions and hundreds of billions of dollars financing its operations, this is a one-note choir.
That's the illusion of the free press.
And these things don't make sense. They're absurd on their face.
Yeah, sure. Anyone can go ahead and compete with these multi-billion-dollar industries that fund our vast media propaganda apparatus. That's all. No problem. Should be no problem. That's called freedom of the press. Well, Kikuza 78, I mean, it's a pipe dream that we have as well. Partnership between powers like China and the USA could literally save humanity. That's the whole thing about, like, when you talk about climate change, there's nothing that our government can say that they're doing about climate change when they're ramping up hostility against China. I mean, if we want to have any hope or chance of confronting this major, major serious crisis, it's going to be with a partnership and a friendship. The way that we're going in the opposite direction right now in Canada is, of course, since we're a junior partner in this global criminal enterprise, are following right along with it. Yeah, but that's the frustrating thing, is that viewpoint, we should be friends with China. Not only should we not have a war, we should have a partnership. We should have an alliance. We should have more diplomatic ties and cultural ties and economic ties. That viewpoint is completely absent from our mainstream discourse. Maybe you might have some people that are like, we shouldn't have war, or like Ben saying, we're not ready for a big war yet. That's the one side versus the other people that are like, we need to prepare for this thing right now. That's the confines of our discourse about China. And the idea of even though we have this freedom of expression and free speech and freedom of press, the idea that someone could go on CNN or MSNBC or any of these mainstream multi-million-dollar media organizations or the New York Times and say like, no, we should be friends actually with China. Not only should we not have a war, we should be increasing our ties with one another. We should be working together to solve these big global crises, which to me is not a controversial or radical viewpoint. This is not a viewpoint that's like extremist or anything. This should be like the sane, rational approach for how we should confront this issue. This viewpoint, though, is completely absent from our mainstream discourse. And it's scary, honestly. It's scary. And you see people getting sucked into that propaganda funnel and supporting this kind of thing. And I think that's really not good.
And it's such a propaganda machine that it sort of normalizes things that once people actually look at them objectively, they'll think like, wow, that's absurd. But it's normalized in the United States. That's what, in fact, makes this like precarious and dangerous, and why, we think that these kind of discussions are so important. We have to find a way to go to the people of the United States and sound the alarm that the absurdity, bizarre, pro-imperialist propaganda of the United States isn't just propaganda. It's in preparation for the next war. All of the pro-war propaganda is always preparatory. It's not just an idea of the mainstream media. They are preparing the population. And obviously, the people of the United States don't want war. If the U.S. sent American troops right now to Ukraine, our demonstrations, the ones we organized by the Answer Coalition, they wouldn't be a few thousand, they'd be a few 100,000. That's why the U.S. has to use Ukrainians to do all the fighting and dying and bleeding. The American people don't want war, but the propaganda barrage is real, and it's a difficult task, but a critical task for progressive forces.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, in the case of China, we've seen this military preparation going back years. Again, the Obama administration, even before the Obama administration, the Bush administration, and many of the neoconservative forces who were driving, Dick Cheney and Bolton, who were driving his foreign policy, they were also anti-China hawks. This is often forgotten. If you go back and you read the documents of the Project for the New American Century, many of these figures who were key State Department officials and Defense Department officials under Bush, their plan, of course, was to wreak havoc all across West Asia, to overthrow all of the independent post-colonial governments, to install puppet regimes. Wesley Clark, the former NATO general, exposed that the goal was to overthrow 7 countries in 5 years, including many of the countries that were destroyed by the U.S., like Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen. But also, China was eventually on the list as well. I mean, it was to overthrow all these independent governments. They managed to do it in the Soviet Union, installing this puppet regime in the 1990s under Yeltsin. They tried to do it in China, and they failed with the color revolution attempt there. And, that was essentially their goal at some point. Now, in terms of the military threats from the United States, we should not forget the United States has a history of actually participating in an invasion of China. In 1900, the so-called 8-Nation Alliance invaded China. The United States was among the countries. It was all of the imperialist countries, the European powers, the United States, and Japan. Of course, Japan has a history of colonizing parts of China, committing genocide in parts of China during World War II. It was the valiant efforts of the Chinese people who defeated Japanese fascism. It was not the United States. It was certainly not the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which even the United States Department of War, which was a more accurate name than the previous name for the Department of Defense, the Pentagon published this report in 1945, the Strategic Bombing Survey, in which they acknowledged that they did not need to actually drop the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that Japan was going to surrender in 1945 anyway, and it was actually the first act of the Cold War against the Soviet Union. It was an aggressive act aimed at the Soviet Union, and the U.S. was more than willing to sacrifice 200,000 Japanese civilians in the process, and many Koreans, as you mentioned. But the point is that it was the valiant sacrifice of the Chinese people. Between 10 and 20 million Chinese died in World War II, and the reason that figure is so that spectrum is so massive between 10 and 20 million is because that history is not that well known. It's not very well documented, the sacrifice of the Chinese people fighting Japanese fascism. So, I mean, if you talk to an average Chinese person, and especially an average Chinese official, a member of the Communist Party of China, they know this history very well. Again, this is very recent. The century of humiliation in which parts of China were dismembered by foreign colonial powers. In 1860, in fact, in Beijing,
I still haven't seen Oppenheimer.
The Summer Palace. You can go to see the ruins of the Summer Palace, which were burnt down
because
France and Britain in 1860 invaded China and burnt down the palace. In 1900, they invaded again. I mean, this is very recent history for
the
China.
The Summer Palace was this huge, like, architectural
on the 1st of October, Mao
marvel
said in
as well.
Beijing, he said, the people
just
of
reduced
China
to rubble
have
by
stood
the
up.
British.
They're not going to be colonized again. So constantly in the Western media, we're led to believe that China is somehow an aggressive power, whereas it's the United States that is surrounding China militarily, just as it has surrounded Russia militarily. I mentioned earlier, this is a very important fact. The U.S. military is spending tens of billions of dollars to put offensive missile systems on the first island chain. They call it the first island chain because it's the series of first islands off of the coast of mainland China. So the U.S. is militarily surrounding China with offensive missiles aimed at the mainland, and the U.S. is working with countries like Japan, South Korea, the Philippines to try to make more and more military bases. In fact, the United States and the Philippines, under the new government of Bongbong Marcos, the son of the former dictator, U.S.-backed dictator, the U.S. and the Philippines just signed a military agreement, and the U.S. is going to create 4 more military bases in the Philippines. And once again, the aim is to encircle China, and the aim is eventually war with China. I would invite people to check out the documentary, which is very prescient, by the incredible reporter John Pilger. He did a documentary nearly a decade ago now called The Coming War with China. It's been clear that
That's really
this
good
was the
to
goal.
watch.
And I mentioned I trailed off because I was talking about the Bush administration's threats, but this goes back to the Obama administration as well, and the so-called pivot to Asia. And Brian, you've frequently pointed out that when the U.S. says pivot to Asia, they mean pivot to war in Asia, specifically war on China. The U.S. has been militarizing the Pacific region, or what they call the Indo-Pacific region, for over a decade now, and it's very clear that their goal is war on China. Now, I don't think that war is inevitable, and I think that everyone in the United States and all around the world should do everything they can to prevent a war from breaking out, because it would be absolutely catastrophic for the people of the Pacific region, but also for the world, because let's not forget, the U.S. and China are nuclear powers. And in the in the Taiwan Strait crisis in the 1950s, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the military commanders in the Pentagon were considering using nuclear weapons against China. This is well documented. The New York Times reported on it because the whistleblower, unfortunately, who recently just passed away of the fame of the Pentagon Papers, he exposed that the United States was planning on nuking China in the 1950s, and fortunately Eisenhower agreed not to do that. But I mean, there's a historical precedent of this, and I really hope we do not come back to a situation today.
It's true that sometimes we talk about living in the worst possible timeline, and we definitely live in one of the worst timelines, but there is an even worse post-World War II timeline that we could be living in. So I guess we should be thankful for the little things that we can grip onto. There's a universe out there that's having an even worse time than we are, so we can hold on to that maybe. A little bit of solace from that.
Where the U.S. is once again considering using nuclear weapons over Taiwan.
Yeah, and just for our audience, we've said this before on our show, Ben, we're basically out of time. So I wanted to talk to you about a number of other topics, but it's been a great discussion. We'll come back to it. But in May 1953, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff did agree unanimously to drop nuclear bombs on China and North Korea. This was documents that came out 30 years later that are written about in the book To Win a Nuclear War by Michio Kaku. They agreed that unless North Korea and China signed the armistice agreement, bringing the military conflict to an end in 1953, because the U.S.
things were
had been
iffy for a time
defeated
there,
in its
right?
efforts to conquer North
MacArthur
Korea.
and that whole
They wanted to
strategy.
end the conflict. Unless they came to the table and signed the armistice, they decided unanimously that they were going to start dropping nuclear bombs on China and North Korea. Undoubtedly, China put pressure on the North Korean government at that point to sign the armistice. I think Kim Il-sung and the leadership in North Korea, like the leadership in North Vietnam under Ho Chi Minh, they were prepared to fight as long as it took to reunify the country. But this is the kind of criminal conduct and arrogance of the war makers in the Pentagon, that they actually agreed, if you don't do what we say, we're going to drop nuclear bombs all over China and North Korea. Ben Norton, we're completely out of time. That
was a fantastic discussion, and I'm going to link the video again. As always, folks, please make sure you are following Breakthrough News and Brian Becker and Ben Norton, who we rely on often for this kind of commentary and analysis. I had a whole other thing that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk this whole thing about Ukraine, threatening to do terrorism. I guess I'm going to have to punt that till tomorrow, though. I thought I could squeeze it in, but I think I'm going to have to punt the whole Ukraine stuff till tomorrow, because I have to go in 10 minutes max to go pick up my kid from school. Folks, on that subject, it is 3.5 hours into the stream. It's been a great stream. We had a lot of great discussion. I've really enjoyed the stream today. 3.5 hours in, I had 5 out of 35 subs, and it just seems like kind of a slower day today, and totally get that. But if there's anyone out there that feels like bailing me out here, that has enjoyed this stream for the last 3.5 hours, going on 4 hours, if there's anyone out there that wants to bail me out and support me for doing this show each and every day, which I know some people seem to like, don't ask me why they like it. Don't ask me why. Some people seem to like it, though. But if you want to support that, again, the only way that this show is able to continue existing is through the donations and the support of the community members. So, I get it's. I know it's a slower day today. I feel strongly though that I can do better than 5. I really feel like that. I really feel like there's at least a few of you out there that want to support the work that I do. They want to subscribe or give subs or join the community, join the Friendship Triangle community, Twitch's only 2-dimensional triangle-shaped friendship access, and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. I know that there's folks out there that are going to bail me out. I'm positive. And won't subject me to the humiliation, the extreme humiliation of leaving the show today, having it would have been more worth it to probably do other things with my time. And yeah, going on 3.5 hours. Haven't really taken much in the way of breaks here. It's been a bunch of really good discourse and commentary. It's been a great day here at TRRS. Couldn't be happier with the content and the wonderful conversation and analysis that we had today. As every day. Isn't that every stream though? Well, yes it is. Sure is. Yep. Yep.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Clobocop, for the gifted
You've
sub.
just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
And thank you, Comrade Bushy, as well, for the 5 gifted subs. Comrade Bushy always bails me out. Always bails me out. And Clobocop, thank you, seriously. Thank you for the gifted sub. For breaking the ice there. Wonderful. Thank you, folks, seriously. And thank you to Comrade Bushy. I really appreciate all the support. You have any other takers? Any other takers, folks? We still got another, 4 minutes to go. We still got another 4 minutes. If there are any other brave heroes who want to step up to the plate and support TRRS and support the work that I do over here on twitch.tv every single day.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Apocalypse Now. Sorry, Apocalypse Now. Thank you for the 100 friend coin. Thank you for that. That's very kind of you. I really appreciate it. What to do here now?
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Sikalufakis, thank you for the gifted sub. Thank you, Sikalufakis. Very much appreciated.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And Goth Engel Sinner, thank you for the gifted sub. Thank you, Goth Engel Sinner, for that as well. And we do have a hype train now. We do have one of those weirdly timed hype trains coming right as I have to leave. You got Vexing Thoughts looking for a possible gift sub. How many subs for a tub stream again? That's 1,000. 1,000 subs, and we're not close. So don't worry about that anytime soon. What else, folks? Is there any other brave hero? Is there another brave hero that will rise? At dawn of the end of the stream, look to the east. I'm looking to the east. Can someone be my Gandalf the White? Coming over the horizon with the Rohirrim. I'm looking to the east. Is there a Gandalf the White out there that wants to come to the rescue of this stream? It's a dark moment. Facing down all the hordes. Sure to be a suicide mission. I'm looking to the east. I think I see something. I see something or someone.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
A white light as the sun crests over the horizon. Thank you, Sikalufakis, for the gift, another gifted sub. That's very kind of you. What a great moment in that film. Love that. Okay, I gotta go ahead and initiate the raid now, though. Who are we raiding here? I will guess I will have to wait for tomorrow for my Gandalf the White. I'll wait till tomorrow for my Gandalf the White. Perhaps tomorrow my savior will emerge. Thank you, folks, for...
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
It is. It's true. I'm looking to the east.
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Oh my god, it's him. It's him. Gandalf the White has in my hour of need. Clobocop, thank you for the very, very generous 5 gifted subs. Thank you, Clobocop. Seriously, I really appreciate it. And thank you, holy shit, thank you to GG Allen Dulles for the 10 gifted subs. That's absolutely incroyable, as we say in French. GG Allen Dulles, thank you so much. GG Allen Dulles is a great username. Seriously, fantastic. Oh my goodness. Right in my hour of need. The night is darkest before the dawn. That's what they say, right? Thank you for supporting the show, everybody. I love you so much. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.